et un professionnalisme remarquable. Je voulais quand même le dire et te remercier parce que je pense que le fond ne serait pas ce qu'il est, ne marcherait pas comme il marche, la journée ne serait pas ce qu'elle est si tu ne faisais pas le travail que tu fais. Donc je voulais vraiment te remercier.
Okay, so off we go. So this panel is going to be discussing the culture of change. In the news business, as you all know, change is a bitch. Change is actually doubly a bitch, because on the one hand, you have to first of all change, and then you have to carry on changing, because the technology evolves. This morning it was interesting, everybody was talking about mobile and tablets, but nobody talked about the watch. So what are they going to do for the watch? That's the next thing. So we're going to be talking about how do you change, what do you need to do to change, and what do you need to overcome in order to be able to change effectively? What sort of governance, what sort of mentalities, what sort of techniques? We've got this great panel to discuss it. Jim Roberts, who is a former New York Times digital guru, who is now the chief executive and the executive editor and the chief content officer for Mashable. We have Sheila Fitzsimmons, whose job is the executive director of transformation, which is a nice way of saying change, at the Guardian, which, as you know in French, is called the Guardian. We have Vincent Perrenne, who is the CEO of the World Association of very much read and much loved analysis of the world of digital change, and is also, and has been since 2012 also, the digital guy at Les Echos. I wanted to start with you, Sheila, because you're right in the thick of things, and I think it would be very interesting to hear from you the steps you've gone through. You've gone through integration, digital first, and now you're doing digital led, which sounds like disintegration. First of all, if you can just tell us a little bit about the steps you've gone through, and then most of all, how do you actually get the whole organization to follow you as you go through those steps? And you need to grab a mic.
Thank you. I'm going to resist the joke that if change is a bitch, then it sort of helps if it's led by somebody who has a certain amount of determination and strength to do it. I think most of my job, to carry on the sort of canine analogy, is that I feel like I'm the sheepdog. If Alan Rusbridger has been very, very clear about the things that he's wanted to do over the last 10 years, and my role has very been much to be the sort of sheepdog at the back, to sort of make sure that everybody is following, because I think in change there is sometimes a risk that the person who's setting the pace goes too far ahead, and you have to make sure that the rest of the organisation goes with you. We're currently, I think, on our third set of changes. I mean, there's been loads and loads of little stages in between. The first was very much sort of integration, and we did that in terms of merging The Guardian, The Observer, and the website, and that was can only be described as a torturous process involving so much brown paper. I'm sure there was a shortage that year of people off-site trying to work out what the North Star was, trying to map the as-is, trying to map the to-be. It was an incredibly formal process. And we did that. And then we moved to digital first, which was much more about, in retrospect, was more about how do we put stories onto the website before we put them in the paper. And the phase that we're in now, which has been very much based on what we learnt in our America office and the Australian office, is digitally led, where rather than just thinking about times of publication, it's how do we make all our decisions digitally led? How do we think about the digital expression first and then retrofit the newspaper from it, rather than the other way around? And this one we're doing, rather than in this sort of big process somewhere else, we're doing it more virally. You know, we're finding good examples, celebrating them, and then hoping that the rest of the organisation catches it. Because if I tried to get anybody into another meeting room with brown paper, they would shoot me.
And does that work? Does the sort of showing up the best viral practices, does that really make it go viral?
I mean, we've only been on this sort of last latest, maybe last phase since just before Christmas, and it does seem to be working. I think there's nothing like saying to a group of journalists, "Oh, look, this group over here are going to be experimenting with this." It seems to make the rest of them think, well, I feel I'm missing out. And that seems to work much better than forcing them in a room and trying to make them be digital. It's more a sense of, I don't want to be left behind. So it does seem to be, yeah, I would say it is working at the moment.
And do you have 100% of the staff eager and gung-ho to do everything?
Absolutely not, no.
What sort of percentage do you think are actually really into this, and what sort of the percentage are just sort of along for the ride? And
I think intellectually and emotionally, the vast majority of them are totally along for the ride. I think in practice, it's just very hard. I think everybody finds it very hard to change, and I would think that it's not very fully established yet, these ways of working. And I think if you were to walk away from it, it could slip quite easily. Not because people are bad or not because people don't want to do it, but it's just much easier to do things the way that you always used to do them rather than do them the new way.
I'd like to now turn to Jim. You have this incredible experience of having been the digital guy at the New York Times, which must be one of the most conservative news organizations out there. Or perhaps that's not true. You got contradict me.
Depends on who you ask, but
and now and then you moved to Mashable. Or first you moved to Reuters, and then you moved to Mashable.
Correct.
It just would be very interesting to get your perspective on how different really is that culture at Mashable from the New York Times.
I don't even know that a comparison is fair. Because I don't say that in a bad way, but the two news organizations couldn't be more different. In fact, I was just talking to my former colleague, Michael Golden, who is at the New York Times, about some of those differences. I went from a news organization that it numbered its reporting staff in the hundreds. There were 1,100 or 1,200 journalists, in fact, by the time I left 2 years ago at the New York Times. And I work in a newsroom now where I think we have 55 journalists. So just, if you just look at the scale, there's obviously no comparison. And I think, of course, we have to, in a small operation, in a digital operation, digital-only operation, have to do things different. I mean, in a sense, we have now a great luxury that the New York Times doesn't have, which is we do not have a legacy to worry about. Our legacy is 9.5 years old. It's all digital. We don't have anywhere near the kinds of fixed costs that a printing news publisher has to manage. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the layers and layers and layers of personnel that we have to deal with, which gives us great liberty and great freedom to take chances, to find new approaches. In fact, I'm in a situation where I have to keep up with my own boss, who's, got all kinds of ideas bouncing all around. And I think that stands in sharp contrast to, a more traditional legacy operation where the decisions from the top are, very carefully calibrated. The decision-making process is very, very slow, very, very deliberate. So I feel like and for me, the world has been turned upside down.
Sheila was talking about how at The Guardian, the initial attempt was to do it in a very sort of programmatic way. At the Times, did you try and do that same sort of programmatic approach to integrating the web and the print, or how was that?
It was a bumpy ride, I think, for a number of reasons. There was, anyone who's studied change and studied the process of change will tell you that change has to start from the top. It has to, or at least it has to be endorsed. It has to be fully believed in. And one of the striking things about the Times, and again, Michael, correct me if I go astray in my analysis, but the need to sort of protect the revenue stream on the traditional legacy print side is so strong that a lot of the decisions are made with that sort of conservative, protective mindset. And so I think that led to a more conservative set of decisions. And I think it made it more difficult for change to really be embraced by the entire organization because of that ambivalence at the top.
And that has now changed?
I think so. I mean, we were just discussing. I haven't been there in 2 years, but from all I can see, the Times is making a lot of innovative steps and recognizing that it obviously needs to protect its business, but it also needs to innovate and experiment as well.
Frederick, I'd like to ask you a question. You have experience, obviously, in French newsrooms, but you also have an international perspective on things. When you look at the difficulties of changing a newsroom, do you think there is cultural specificity, or is it really very much the same problem everywhere? Are French journalists harder to get to change than English ones or American ones, for example?
So, French are used to bash quite a bit what they are doing. So I will try to escape this trap. The thing is, the more I go into it, the more I think as Sheila just mentioned, for instance, in a legacy media such as The Guardian or such as the Les Echos or maybe the New York Times, you will end up having only a small fraction of people being actually on board. I totally agree with you. Intellectually speaking, the whole people we are working with are kind of super smart. They know quite a lot of things. And of course, they do understand the meaning of the necessity of change. But when it comes to overcome, for instance, the so-called nobility of the paper, it's a completely another story. I think, and I think it is very unfortunate, is that for legacy media, for quite a while, the noble product will remain the paper. And so I think this is complicated. Having said that, there is in legacy media some kind of structural impediment to change. I was recently discussing with a French publisher, Paris-based publisher. He told me that it took him 6 months just to remove a half position of a copy-proof person within the newsroom. So it just gives you an idea about the agility and the flexibility which is at stake here. So and it percolates in almost every layers, especially when it comes to develop project. We have in the legacy media an approach to failure, for instance, which is absolutely at the polar opposite of what you have in technology company. And when it comes to deal with project in a newspaper, for instance, compared to a technology company, in the newspaper we will put, if you take an aircraft analogy, you will put just enough gasoline to have the aircraft running, long runway, slow slope, 10 degrees above the horizon, and after a while we'll say, this project after a year, it's okay, it's not losing that much money, or it's not bleeding that much money, so we're going to keep it up running. By contrast, you will have a technology company, they will put full-blown of gasoline, engine full throttle up, and they will take off very, very quickly, and they might fail, of course. The rate of failure might be greater, but the ability to start over will be greater as well. So I think this is really important in the way I envision the future of legacy media.
Okay. Vincent, yesterday we had a brief conversation, and you were saying that what you think newsrooms need are product managers and people who understand consumer behavior better. Perhaps you want to talk about that. Is that what would make the difference in terms of changing the culture?
Wanifra was born in 1948, and these publishers were not stupid even at this time. They asked a third-party organization to bring outsiders in their thinking. And by outsider, I mean people from the international, so French working on their issues in France have less chances actually to find a solution than bringing other perspective from other countries. And when I talk about product manager with a strong consumer insight, is also to bring the outsider, which is the audience today. For me, my experience in newsrooms is, and not only in France, I work in Switzerland, in Spain, and other countries, it's the problem is that most of these people, and it's not about newsroom, it's from the top to the bottom of the organization, we are really insider focused. We look at our processes, we don't look at the audience. And I don't see too many actually very good examples, even in 2015, about position in newsrooms where people have a responsibility similar to the editor also to drive the change, not to give orders, but to document the understanding of the market. And when I was talking about consumer insight, it's not about Chartbeat or metrics, which is great because it changed a lot in the attitude of most of the new staff, because now they've got numbers. But numbers is not enough. You need to explain what is behind numbers, so you need expertise on that. And I don't see these expertise today in our newsrooms.
Sheila, is that your experience? Do you look at what
It's
consumers
maybe
are
another
saying?
example, because I met the product manager recently from The Guardian, and he has, The Guardian has a very, very good practice in that respect. I don't know, I'm not working for The Guardian, so.
We do have a very strong product team that are part of the digital development team, but they come and sit on our news desk. We have our analytics person sitting right next to the person who is editing that day. We have sort of people who sort of match product managers called executive producers, and in a way, the exec producers can talk editorial to editorial and tech to tech, and they talk to the product managers who then can talk to the developers, because a lot of this is about translating the two cultures. I think journalists can use up valuable digital development resource really, really quickly if they're given direct control over it. So we have a sort of partnership between the product managers and the exec producers to try and get the best thing that works for our users and works for the journalism.
Was that something that came about through trial and error, or how did you come up with that?
At The Guardian, always through trial and error. I think we're quite good at doing that, and we have sufficiently short memories that we can change what we've done and do the next thing and believe that absolutely is the right thing to do, and then change our minds again 6 months later and think that's absolutely the right thing to do. So yes, and I think it's also changed as the product managers have changed. They're much more journalistic than they were 3 years ago. So I think the gap between them and us is getting smaller, in the same way that the developers are even more journalistic than they used to be. So I think we used to spend so much time worrying about integrating news and features, or the paper and the web. And now I think we spend just as much time thinking about how we work with product analytics and the developers themselves, rather than worrying about how we work with the paper and the website.
Jim, you're nodding.
I was nodding because you talked about trial and error. Trial and error, and that's one thing that I'm not. I think actually does still distinguish a more digitally minded startup culture versus a legacy traditional culture. The willingness to fail, I think, is still a big distinguishing factor, and I can hear in your statements that some of that is changing for the good. I can't overstate the necessity to fail. I can't overstate how important it is to fail, and to fail quickly, obviously. One of the things that I saw quite a bit at the Times was, we would begin a project, no matter what it was, so much time and effort goes into it, a huge investment goes into it, that it makes it so much more difficult to pull back and to say, that didn't work, let's walk away. And I think when you are in an environment like mine now, where your projects are smaller, they're more agile from the very outset, it's much easier to say to yourselves, okay, all right, well, that didn't work, let's adapt it a little bit and move on. And I think that's one thing that legacy institutions need to do better, need to be obviously more agile in what they do, but also more willing to say, hey, we need to start over again, or we need to learn, and we need to understand better the trial and error process.
Frédéric, are you good at failing?
Oh, we had our share of failure, but we definitely need to rethink in terms of mentality in that respect. Of course, that's. In that instance, that's a French problem. Once you fail in France, you are marked.
It's not a French problem.
It's not a French problem, but
it's a problem.
But okay, if you say so. Yeah. But I'm surprised after all these years, seeing the technology company taking over. We are still so waterproof to the notion of failure. I'm surprised to which extent we have not been able to integrate this notion of failure. And the strange thing is that in the current world, this is the highly funded technology company which are looking at the longer term, and the legacy media, I mean, this is a short term to say the existing media, who are looking at on the short term. Basically, when you launch a product here in France or in a legacy media, people will say, well, your stuff needs to make money in the first year. And if you come up with the project saying, okay, you agree this is a good idea? Yes, it's a good idea. You agree that there is the potential for it? Yes, we agree. So now let's start with the audience, build the audience first. And there is tons of example within the realm of technology/media company of the new world, which start extremely brilliantly by building a huge audience first and then monetizing afterwards. We are not able to think in that terms in the legacy media, and I think this is a real problem.
Okay, so we want to get back to the actual culture of change, and it'd be interesting to know. I mean, Sheila, you talked about this sort of this viral approach, but Vincent, from your experience in working with different media organizations, are there certain things that do work better than others? I mean, is this viral approach to encourage people to copy each other, and is that a good way to do it, or what in your experience works best?
There is no one single solution. It's just it's a matter of process or culture. I'm surprised about this debate about innovation because I've got a strong. I mean, I've got two backgrounds. One is marketing research, consumer research. The other is about technology. And when you look at the process in a newspaper, innovation has always been key to the productivity and the revenues in the pre-publishing and in the printing. Innovation stops in the newsroom. So newspapers, I mean, should be aware about how does it work actually, and that worked for decades and centuries. And it always came from, again, I think the outside. The suppliers, I mean, the connection between publishers and suppliers has been key to the development of innovation. Publishers themselves rarely invent something. It always came from the suppliers or, again, a demand or the market. And I think it should be the same, certainly in our environment, in the news environment. I would add a third element, which is, for me, also rather new and maybe untapped by many of our publishers in our community, is the strength of and the intelligence and the talent pools of the universities and academic centers. I'm surprised how skeptical this industry is about working and cooperating with academics. And I understand that in certain countries, I mean, for instance, France, it might be something difficult. I mean, talking about short term and long term. They are talking about long term. They never talk the same language with publishers and business people in our publishing industry. If you look at the transportation industry, energy, pharma, even insurance, they work with academic and research labs. So that's one of our projects also, is to push these communication and this flow of talents and expertise between, and technology transfer between academics and publishers. And I think there is a huge potential to bring these, Ludovic talked about diversity this morning. It's about a diverse opinion, but different disciplines to shake your own mindset. And this just, I mean, that can only come from, again, people that don't work in your own environment, that question your process, challenge your process.
Okay. One of the questions that has come up frequently is, what sort of governance is going to make change work best? We've just had a very interesting experience at The Guardian, where the journalists have voted in a non-binding fashion, if I understand correctly, for an editor. Is that good? Does that help the process of change, or does that actually get in the way? I mean, you can make the case. I used to work at the Wall Street Journal, and in comes Rupert Murdoch and just says, "Okay, we're going to change," and it happens. Otherwise, you get fired, which is a different approach. Is the Guardian the right way forward? That sort of buy-in and consensus.
Well, I think it will definitely help Kath. To the extent that Kath Viner, the new editor, to the extent that everybody heard her manifesto and the hustings that she did with all the staff. But in actual fact, what was striking about it was the similarities between the things that Kath was saying, the things that Janine Gibson had learnt in America, the things that Wolfgang Blau was talking to us about, and the things that Emily had put into practice and is now seeing and observing in Colombia. And, you know, lots of us were kind of very keen to how do we kind of hold on to all the talents, because actually, you know, the sort of monolithic one person setting the pace isn't, I mean, it's just too big and too complicated. So, I mean, it was an indicative ballot. It was, I think it was quite hard work. It was hard for them. It was great for the organisation listening and learning so much. I mean, I think the governance things I worry about much more are things like monthly reporting, quarterly reporting, which I think is the sort of deadening, I mean, obviously you have to do these things, but is the deadening hand in terms of when you're trying to do innovation. Because I do think we have done things, whether we've launched apps or products, that a board gets very fixated on about when is it going to happen, what's the date, you know, what's the launch strategy. And that seems to be completely against what you're trying to do in a much faster, agile way in the newsroom. So I sort of dread it when we go to the board and say we're going to launch something in 3 months' time, because you know full well it'll be 6 months' time. And that's a sort of that governance stuff about governance on product development. I don't think we've cracked properly at all.
Jim, do you agree? Have you cracked that issue?
Well, you know, I guess my prescription for at least part of that issue when it comes to products is, you know, to learn to iterate, learn to be comfortable with a product that works and work on it more and make it better, but get it out there before somebody else thinks about it, or get it out there while you can still, again, experiment and innovate. Again, I have the luxury of being in a completely different environment from one like that, where nobody is looking at that kind of a timetable. So I don't have to face quite that sort of pressure. But I also work in an environment where it's not necessarily that, you know, good enough is good enough. It's an environment in which, you know, we know what it takes to produce something. We will set a goal, and we know that the minute that is finished, we will iterate upon it and, again, try to make it better. I think in more legacy operations, the stakes are higher. There are more people, more resources being applied to it, and there's more of a desire to make that product perfect before anyone gets to see it or use it.
Do you think it's a good idea to elect your editor-in-chief? Is that going to help change?
You know, until the Guardian went through that process, I hadn't really contemplated it. I think that...
be frank. Try to be frank on this one, because...
I don't think it's the best way. No, I don't think it's the best way. How's that?
It was hard, but...
It was hard for me to say that, yes. I'm not certain necessarily that democracy in that sort of a situation is the best way. How's that?
And I agree. This is, by the way, a very strange setup to have two journalists saying that democracy is not exactly the best thing in the newsroom. So
it was very hard. It pushed me to say it, though.
No, I've been through this process, or I have seen this process in motion in several instances of my professional life, and I don't think this is the best idea. I think the governance of a news organization is somewhat very complex, because unlike of a commercial company or an industrial company, which has a goal pretty straightforward, making money, developing itself, and so on and so forth, there is some kind of intangible issues which pertains to the news itself, which is, for example, preserving the freedom of the journalist. So it has to be done in several ways. Either the news organization is owned by some kind of trust, in which there is no very much risks, or it's owned by a set of shareholders in which you will have the board of directors, which will make its job, making the company more profitable and so on and so forth. But in my view, it has to be supplemented by some kind of board of trustees. I mean, kind of body of person from the internal, from the inside, from the outside, which will basically warrant the fact that there won't be no interferences between the board, shareholders, or external pressure, political pressures, economical pressures over the newsroom. And if candidates for editor-in-chief can only, in my view, present their intention to this board of trustees, to this board of independent people, that's a much better system than having to go before the newsroom and say, guys, this is my project and this is a hell of a fucking good project, excuse my French, but this is a very good project and so on and so forth. It doesn't work because basically you end up by having some kind of lower common denominator. And we're actually quite frank by saying that all the people, I'm sure, presented a very high quality project, but it was basically the same, basically the common denominator of what should be done for the Guardian.
So you're looking at the economist model rather than the Guardian?
Yeah, actually, I'm much more comfortable with the economist model. What about yourself in terms of economist model for the Guardian? I'm sorry, I'm taking your...
No, I think we would. This was very much at the instigation of the union that decided that they were going to have a ballot.
Another plague in our industry, the unions. We should talk about that.
And I do think, sort of objectively, the risk is that you do come to something that is more populist than necessarily the right thing to do. Because, I don't think people are going to vote for radical change. I think they want to feel there is, low risk and there is continuity. Having said that, I think lots of you will have heard Emily and Wolfgang and Janine and Kath speak. I think they're still right out there in terms of the things that they want to do. But it is definitely the case a vote will bring down the sort of radical nature, I think.
Well, it's not entirely true that people won't follow for someone advocating radical changes, because these times are calling for radical changes. When you look at the trends of our industry, and I'm talking about legacy media, when you just, whatever the metrics you might take, you might see a very terrible depletion of our revenue streams, performances, increasing competition from the outside. These times are calling for a radical change.
And I don't think we're doing it. I don't think we're radical enough.
You're not alone.
Let's talk a little bit about the unions. Let's talk about the economic situation, because one of the questions I would have is, I lived through 10 years at Time Magazine where every year there was another restructuring plan and more people lost their jobs. Does the fear of change, which then equates to job losses, is that one of the big impediments to actually bringing through change? Was that the issue at the Times?
I was thinking, I'm not sure this is directly in answer to this, but one of the biggest things that, to me, helped the Times change was the recession. 2008, 2009, when, that was a wake-up call for everyone, for the industry as well as for everyone who worked at that institution and I'm sure throughout the media. I think when that hit, it was such a jolt. We could see the damage throughout the industry in the United States, in other countries. I think that at that moment, people began to realize, if I don't change, we could all become extinct, or some version of that. So, I think that may argue in slightly in the other direction from what you were saying, but I really felt like something did happen in that period between 2008 and 2010.
Vincent, do you see that? Do you see there a connection between the economic situation and the fear of change?
There's certainly a direct connection, yes. It's a combination of economic crisis and need to change, need to adapt, and also, again, the reason why we are here also, it's about technology. And the new consumer hands technology, and also the new tools used in newsrooms. And again, I may be obsessed, but again, I think being driven by the audience and having a chance to discuss numbers, metrics, attitudes, behaviors from your audience is a great value for a journalist, because he just understands who he writes for, who he talks to. And it's maybe certainly a pleasure also, a personal pleasure to understand exactly why, who do I address my thoughts and input. And I think that changed radically. I think that was also, for me, one of the major breakthroughs during the past, let's say, maybe 5 years. So it's rather new, 5-6 years, is these rapidly advancing new technologies where you go in a newsroom, and in every newsroom in the world, most of them, they do have these big walls with data and metrics is the first, I mean, it's not enough for me, but it's the first really change, and with a combination of course, the pressure from the economics. I mean, you need to move. I mean, you cannot just stay there. I mean, you commit suicide otherwise. It's no use going to work every morning.
So Sheila, how do you then reassure and encourage the holdouts, those who don't want to change and who are in the newsroom, who don't like what's going on and who grumble? And we all know that there are lots of them. How do you actually deal with them? How do you just sort of essentially get them to retire?
No, I mean, we endlessly talk to them. I mean, I think that's the only thing that we can do. It's a constant dialogue. I mean, I think it's sort of different people in different groups. We've tried everything. We have people from outside come and talk. We have sort of experts within the building. You know, we sort of have these sessions called Let's Talk Digital, where, you know, a person from one department will come and talk to other people about it. I mean, it's a slow and gradual process, and it does seem to be the case that every year some people will sort of go, I don't think this is for me anymore. I feel this isn't the job that I came into. But it's constant communication. That's the only thing that we're doing, really. And training, obviously.
And Jim, from your perspective, I mean, what you see at Mashable, I mean, how much of that would be applicable back at the Times in terms of getting people excited about changing?
You know, one of the things that I saw a little bit of this at the Times, and I'd be curious to know how much of it goes on now. Vincent talked about access to metrics. I think a lot of traditional journalists, when Chartbeat started filtering into the newsroom, their first reaction was, I don't go near that stuff. I don't care what the audience thinks. But then vanity takes over, right? And so people get curious. Okay, what are the metrics attached to my stories? It became a very personal thing, and I think social media has sort of reinforced that a little bit as well. Just the simple fact that you can count Twitter followers. People pay attention to those. You know, we are all vain people. We pay attention to metrics like that, and I certainly think in terms of the culture the culture I'm surrounded by, where everyone is very, very active on social. Everyone is also pretty aware of where they stand, where they rank socially. That, you know, some of that awareness, I think, could be part of the lives of more traditional journalists. And I think that, you know, playing on their popularity, playing on that vanity is a valuable thing. And the other aspect of it is convincing them, making them realize that they don't live in a vacuum, that that metrics are important. Metrics do demonstrate your connection to your audience, and if you're not connecting to an audience, then what are you doing?
Frederick, does vanity work in France too?
Oh yes, vanity is a great leverage, of course. No, I mean seriously, we have been doing a lot of progress of people looking at metrics right now, and we are happy at Les Echos to see that the actual requests for more and more sophisticated instruments are coming from the newsroom, which is a very good sign. I just would like to come back to one of your answer earlier about the drivers of change, and you mentioned at the New York Times the recession, but don't you think, both of you, that at this very, very moment, the change we are seeing in the media landscape are not some kind of worse than any recession. When you see, for instance, that Facebook is about to become the main gatekeeper, like it or not, and I'm not judgmental about Facebook. My judgment is very negative about Facebook, but that's another subject. But no, seriously, I mean, I was having the discussion recently with someone at the Financial Times. He explained to me that when the Financial Times pushes a set of news toward the news feeds of people who subscribe to the newsfeed of the Financial Times, only 16% of it reaches the end user. And to me, and for Les Echos, it's 12%, because I didn't believe the figures. I had the guy repeating twice, and I checked on our own stuff, and it's 12% for Les Echos, and the lady in charge of the social said it was not that bad. And I say, suddenly you have these millions of people getting the information primarily from Facebook were actually kind of super filtered. And to me, this is a much bigger threat than any kind of recession. I would like very much to have your view about this.
Well, I suppose I think that, because I mostly work with the journalists who, are constantly asking why are we doing this, and I feel like they've gone through phases where, first of all, why are we doing SEO? And we spent a long time explaining why they did that, and they're all really good at that now. And then we did a lot of why it's really important to be on Twitter, and it absolutely is now. It's about what is our relationship with Facebook and showing them how getting shares on Facebook in terms of the virality of their content is the most important thing. Now, I would have thought 6 months ago we were not talking to them about it, and now we are talking to them constantly, and that's why I think it's what I'm saying about the training and the constant conversation, because what you were saying to them 6 months ago is already out of date, and that's why you can't stop. You can't sort of think we've done it. We've delivered that message, because you would have missed Facebook, the sort of the Facebook effect, the Facebook surge that everybody's really conscious of in the newsroom now.
So, how much do you think the issue for you is a generational one, and how much of it is an organizational one? I mean, can you actually set up an organization in such a way that it will embrace innovation and it'll bring everybody along with it, regardless of where they come from and what they think? Or is it really a question of getting younger people? You're looking for.
Well, I mean, it's so much easier. It's been so much easier in America and Australia. I mean, obviously the people who work there, had their own issues to deal with. But it is very, very difficult when you're also trying to produce a newspaper 7 days a week. I mean, it's kind of lovely to fantasize the blank piece of paper, and if you were going to start again, would you set it up like this? No, you wouldn't. But as long as the economics say that I like to think of our print revenue as sort of sheltering digital. That's what I try to sort of imagine it as. That it's helping to fund while we make that transition, because I think the newsroom don't find it very inspiring when we talk about the legacy legacy business, or they feel that we're sort of, describing it as a weight or something that slows us down. Whereas talking to them about it in terms of, you're helping us make this that revenue is helping us make that transition. But no, you wouldn't start like this. But we are where we are, and you have to kind of, make the very, very, very best of it. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Vincent, is it generational or is it organizational?
Definitely not generational. My most innovative colleagues and partners and boss were retired maybe 10 years ago. So it's nothing to do with generations. I think it's, I would say a little bit of organization, but much more about individuals. You need a leadership somewhere, and not only at the top of the organization, but also in the intermediate levels of the organization. So no generational issue. For me, it's not a generational issue.
Well, given my age, I have to say it's not a generational issue.
There you go.
So yes, for speaking for that generation, it's definitely not. No, it is. I agree, Vincent. It is an organizational one. I go back to what I said very early on in the panel, where I do think that direction from the top, change doesn't necessarily have to be led from the top per se, but it does need to be endorsed from the top. It needs to, the people who are trying to bring about change in an organization, they can push against walls and put their heads against walls, but if they don't have their superiors saying, yes, we're supportive of your efforts, they're ultimately doomed.
So what would you say would be what advice would you give to a newspaper on the planet Mars which hasn't yet gone digital? How would you do it? What are the crucial? What would be they're still running on tablets, on stone, or whatever it is. What are the sort of the best practices? What really works in your experience? Is there anything that you could sort of nail down and say this is really what you have to do?
I mean, I think in terms of going back slightly to the generational question, we've had about 15 trainee digital journalists in the newsroom this year, and the idea was that we were going to train them. That's why they were the trainees. And after about 6 weeks, we all realised that they were going to train us, because actually they were doing things just because they would do it for their friends, or they would do it in their student publication or whatever. So I think you have to sort of top and bottom it, and so I sort of think, you have to have a vision, you have to have this new blood that's kind of coming into your newsroom that I think are digital natives, because I think otherwise it's just hard to be constantly to tell. I think you have to show, not tell. And then I think you have to really get as much out of your product team and your digital development team, because they're sort of at the side of you. And I think you have to kind of, attack it on all three levels. I think if you just leave it to one person to make inspiring speeches, that won't work. If you just have new blood, that won't work. But I think you just have to kind of attack it on multiple different levels, and don't give up, because, as I said before, I think it slips back terribly easy in the legacy business.
So what proportion in your newsroom of journalists are there to product managers to developers?
So in the DigiDev team, which would include infrastructure and developers and product managers, there's 140 in our DigiDev team, and there are 700 journalists. So that's about what, 1 to 6 or something.
How is that at Les Echos?
It's much more than that, actually. One of the first advice, if I may, I mean, this is very pretentious to give some advice, but it's like you said, investing in technology will be a key issue. I think our companies in legacy media are underfunded, which is a real problem because it prevents innovation, and they are under technology developed, and plus the organization are way too complex. I mean, we should go for small teams, project teams, encouraged to try, to fail, to iterate, and to go back to the drawing boards and so on. And so this is key in my view.
Vincent, do you have some words of advice for our Martian friends?
I think we also tend to forget the mid-management. We always talk about the top managers or the bottom line. I mean, my experience when I was, again, referring to this experience about introducing audience inside in the newsroom, is that of course, I had the endorsement of my editors and my CEOs, but the most critical people I ever worked were, the mid-managers, the editors, or the head of sections, because they are really protective. If you can work on that, that would be certainly helpful. That would help me in my past position. It's also a lot about diversity. I was at this time really also keen to leverage the visuals, infographics, and pictures in my newsroom and in the newspaper, and I also felt that these people were aside, as suddenly someone said about this ostracism of technologists in the newsroom. We've been also we had a similar attitude with many of our journalists, in picture journalists, infographics, and others. Talking about diversity, so again, the more diverse your staff is, the better it is, and you need to bring different disciplines, not only journalists. In our organization, we also talk a lot about gender balance also in our industry, which is also something critical. I don't know if it's a solution. It's good to at least have a look at these, right balance of diverse cultures, diverse opinions, and again, talk to your audience, talk to your suppliers. I'm still believe that many of these innovations comes from this environment, and these also set up this building. Shows that. You've got a lot of developers working here, and they don't work for them; they work for someone else most of the time. Well, say talk to your audience, talk to your suppliers, and I'll just mark down something else.
Talk to everybody.
No, but this is what he said. It's Facebook 6 months ago at The Guardian was certainly not the same issue as it is today. If you don't engage a discussion with these people, you don't have any chance to find a solution. If we don't engage a discussion with Google, as we said this morning, there is no way also to find a solution to cooperate. So, engage a discussion, and that plays also internally. I've been dealing with a lot of silos in my companies in the past. silos, technologists, printing people, okay, well, advertising people, okay, newsroom. I was an advertising sales manager in my past also experience. I was not allowed by my manager at this time, mid-90s, to talk to the newsroom. So that was her responsibility, and I was just a junior sales manager. I mean, that's not the way, an organization can move forward.
We need also to think in terms of the relationship to customers. And we need to take into account the expectation of the audience. Today, the expectation of the audience we are facing in digital media are the customers from Amazon, are the customers from Apple. And if you compare the way that, for instance, you have to exchange an item purchase on Amazon, send it back, and the way that you have to deal with the customer relationship of a subscription department, of the economist, et cetera, it will be a totally different world. And it's not an accident that personally, over the last 2 years, I had a very complicated and sometimes unsolved subscription problem with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fortune, and the Economist, and plus another one for paid and expensive subscription, while at the same time, I'm dealing with Amazon on a constant basis because I'm a fairly big customer, decent like everybody else in this room, customers from Amazon, and it goes flawlessly. Same, and I think today the expectations that we are facing for our customers is basically to have exactly the same experience they have with Les Echos, with The Guardian, than they have with any technology vendor. So that's a very important issue, I think.
Okay. We have just a few minutes left. I'd like to ask one last round of questions, which is related to something that Vincent actually mentioned, and that is the traditional separation between the news side and the business side, which obviously the New York Times was incredibly strong. The Wall Street Journal was very strong too. When we're talking about the culture of change, does that have to change too? And if so, how do you manage that?
Of course. This actually, I had an idea about your Mars question, and I think I can put these two together. There can't be a caste system in a modern news organization. Now, Frederic mentioned, I can't remember what you were saying about the premiere, that the paper was the nobility. Thank you, the nobility of the print side. That carries over to everyone else not being noble, everyone else being an underclass, and I think that whether that is digital journalists or whether it is people in the product department or people on selling ads or on the business side, I actually feel, maybe this is some utopian vision that would never happen, but I do think that too many news organizations see these structures in their head where this group is anointed as, they are the premier, they are the nobility. And I think that undercuts, that hurts the efficiency of an organization. It certainly is going to make it more resistant to change if those kinds of walls are built up. I certainly saw some of that resistance at the times where both on the, within the news department, there was definitely a first class and a second class group of citizens, the print journalists versus digital journalists. I'm sure a lot of that has since changed. But it also, again, carries over to the division between the newsroom and the business side. And in that case, there continues to be, a nobility on that side that doesn't, cross over that wall. So I think to change, that part has to change. That structural aspect has to change.
Sheila, how does it work at The Guardian? Is there a growing togetherness and love-in between the business and the news side? And
we police our boundaries very carefully when it comes to ensuring editorial integrity and that the reader or the user knows under what circumstances a piece of copy was commissioned, who wrote it, whether somebody else paid for it, what was the relationship. So we are rigid, and we watch that very, very carefully. In every other way, we talk to commercial more than we ever did when it was just a newspaper. And I think that this idea of user journeys or customer journeys, we've got There's more brown paper that's sort of, if you're logging on because you're a subscriber to this, or you're trying to buy this thing, or you want to put a comment, all of these systems are so separate that I just think we expect our readers, users, whatever you want to call them, to jump through hoops. And we want to kind of build systems that we value them both as sort of people who buy things from us, as people who want to read things or want to comment on the things. And therefore we spend more time than ever working with them, trying to get those parts right, while as being very, very clear about what is sponsored content, what is advertorial, and what is editorial content, and making that clearer than ever, the distinction between those kinds of content.
Frederick at Les Echos, do you have the same ability to distinguish so clearly between the different types?
We separate the two words very forcefully. It took something like 6 months to come up with some kind of agreement on the brand content kind of thing. And well, I think it's okay, because our franchise is our core identity is to provide balanced and thorough and credible information. So I have anything against that. But I would say that in general, the boundaries between business and editorial is blurring. So I think this is one of the part to play for the legacy media or digital player. Means that they must remain credible in the information that they provide. And the problem is the level of the advertising situation is so bad when it comes to digital, that a lot of media tends to go beyond what they should do. And I think this is a problem.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to wrap up there, but just to say thank you very much indeed to Jim, to Sheila, to Vincent, and to Frederick, and thank you to our Martians.
Was it the most uncomfortable chair?
Yes.
We have to go back.
Yeah, you've probably got to go and do your plane. Hello? Yes, okay, so the program is now going to continue. If you could take your seats. Okay. All right, well, I'm very pleased to present our next speaker, who is Richard GUTJAHR. It's a very good year for Richard GUTJAHR, and he is going to be talking about personal branding. Richard has a TV career behind him at ARD, the German public broadcaster, and he, I guess you host a couple of shows, and he's won several prizes, including in 2001. Back in 2001. He was the Zeit's Net Journalist of the Year, so that was really ahead of your time. Anyway, I look forward very much to hearing what you have to say now. You also work as a consultant to various news organizations, from what I gather. So this is Richard GUTJAHR telling us about personal branding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. First of all, please excuse me, we have some viewers at home. So I'm going to position them over here, and I'm sorry to say that your live stream doesn't work in Germany because it's geo-blocked. You've heard of that phenomenon? We have it day in, day out in Germany. So this is the only way for the German audience to participate, which is unfortunate because we have such a nice setup for the live stream, but it's just not working in Germany. So that's exactly what we face with these days and being digital these days. So instead of introducing myself, I brought a little video in order to tell you guys where I'm now and where I came from. My former boss cries when he sees that. He's just like, what have we done? What have we created here? So talking about my former boss, I used to be like a official, like very traditional journalist. It's not going to work from this distance, I guess. Oh no, why is that? Oh, wrong one. Okay, so that was me 10 years ago. Yeah. So I was a news anchor. I actually still am. I'm going to be on the air tonight at 11 p.m. in Munich. So I have to get changed and get dressed into that costume again. When we talked about the New York Times being very conservative and like old-fashioned, we can beat that. So and it was 10 years ago that I kind of felt in my home, which is the BR, it's a public German television, so it's state-funded, and it's everybody has to pay the fees for it. Thank you very much for that, the German audience. So it was back then when I felt that we kind of lost track of the speed of disruption. I actually had the feeling that sometimes our audience was faster than we were in the journalistic newsroom. So, and I try to like bring a little bit more spirit into our news room, but you know, we're a little bit more conservative, and we were also very protective about what we had. This is a chart showing me 5 years ago, and it's a matter of fact, I just made my tax income a couple weeks ago. So this was how I made money 5 years ago. So most of the revenue, most of my income was based on good old traditional television. Now that has changed. I want to tell you why and how and what I'm actually doing today and why I think it's the better option than staying in good old traditional television. So everything actually started with this little device. It's been, I think, 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, in April 2012 or 11, it was introduced to the Americans first. So I said, come on, let's go to New York and buy this thing and see if it's really saving journalism. And so back in these old days, my TV channel said, yeah, Richard, but that is not for our audience. They're not interested in that kind of a thing. I said, come on, guys, like we're online, we should be out there and like innovate. But they refused to cover this new device, and they said, okay, let's take a break. I had some leftover holidays, so I took a break. I went to New York on myself, and I took my audience with me, all by myself. Now this is the logo of my television channel, and I said, okay, it's blue, it's large, but I can do that too. So I created my own logo, and I put it up on my blog, which I show you here. This is the old design though. And I invited my audience to come with me and to join me on that trip. So basically what I did was I was sitting in Fifth Avenue and inviting everybody like to ask questions to whether you should buy this thing, how's the atmosphere, how long is the line. Let me give you a little example of what I did.
So what are you doing here?
I'm waiting here for the Apple iPad.
Oh, that's really cool. Wait, so you sleep here to wait for it?
Sure.
That's crazy.
What are you in
What are you in
line
line for? For the iPad.
For the iPad already?
Yeah.
Camped out. Released tomorrow.
Right.
Hardcore. Good for you.
Darf ich vorstellen, meine Sitznachbarn. Giovanna, 11 Jahre alt, und ihre Mutter Jeannie. Ja, und auf der anderen Seite, das ist Dean. Genauso verrückt wie wir alle.
Why not? It's the iPad. This might be bigger than anything.
Das denkt offenbar auch.
A little bit because it's German, but what I basically did was just sitting there, spending the time blogging, live blogging, tweeting, and so on, and somehow the word spread that there was a crazy German guy sitting in front of the Apple store and doing movies, doing stuff, and all of a sudden the story took off. Now, this is the tweet that I actually sent out once I got the thing, because I happened to be in #1 that day. That's just on the sideline. But what happened was that this really spread and found its way back into the old media. So all of a sudden, like a subject that back then nobody really wanted to cover, found its way back to my very own TV channel due to this. Because all of a sudden they realized actually people are interested in that kind of a thing. So, and here's something that happened to me these days. All of a sudden, I Google myself here and there. You do that, right? Yes, right, you should. So all of a sudden, like, Google exploded just because of my name. And that was the day that I realized, wait a minute. Sometimes you don't need a big news station or broadcaster. You can do stuff on your own, like on your own initiative. So what I learned this day is that attention doesn't really require broadband and big networks. It just needs a good story, something that people need and they don't get somewhere else. So that was the first thing that I've realized back then. And the second one is that I've, without knowing, created my own distribution channel. Right? I wasn't dependent on my television network anymore. I was not dependent on my boss anymore. No, we're not going to do that, or we're going to do that. So I was pretty much like liberated from all these old kind of problems that I was facing. Now, having done that, you might say it's easy to cover a new Apple product because that always draws attention. Jump forward 1 year. This is Tahrir Square, 2012, in the beginning of the revolution. And I kind of felt left alone by the news channels, for there was only Al Jazeera in the very beginning covering what was going on. There was nobody else. It was just Al Jazeera for nearly a week. So I basically did what I've done a year before. I just packed my stuff. I happened to be in Tel Aviv that day, so I just packed my stuff and went over, like it's just 100 kilometers, to the border of Egypt and fought my way through to Cairo. And guess what? That tweet that I sent a year ago about like me having bought the iPad did the same magic with hard news. All of a sudden, the people were like kind of following my blog. They were tweeting about it. They were sharing it. I put all the pictures that I was able to do on Flickr, for I knew that there was a need for images. It was really hard to get information in the early days of that revolution. So, and having done that, the people picked it up. They shared it. They said, here are the images that Richard put up. My TV channel actually called me and interviewed me. And I asked them, how did you know that I'm here? They said, we read your blog. Now, how do we make money with this? It was intriguing for me to see, first of all, I'm a journalist, like by heart. I didn't ask for money back then. I just really wanted to get that story done. I wanted to be witness. I wanted to lend my eyes and ears to the people who cannot follow what's going on. And there are so many like bizarre stories out there. I just wanted to be there and be witness of what's going on. So that was my first motivation. The second one, of course, was sooner or later getting money, because the internet was cut down. Like the mobile networks were not working properly. So how did I go online? I happened to have an Israeli telephone provider who somehow managed to roam with the one and only still working mobile network. So I was roaming my data, and it cost me a fortune. When people realized that I'm spending like hundreds and hundreds of dollars every hour, they started to collect money from me. And they asked me for like how they can do that. So I put up my PayPal account, and here you see like what kind of money came in these days. I didn't ask for it. They asked for it. They've asked, how can we contribute? We like your reporting. So that was kind of a wake-up call for me. So I brought you some numbers so that you can see how much money you can actually do with little money. And it turns out that 5 and 10 euros was the most amount of money that people were contributing. And so that gave me a little bit of food for thoughts. I made like 5,000 euros at the end of the day. That covered my expenses. I didn't earn much money. But it was, I mean, it's better than like owing the bank 5,000 euros, right? So, and when I was back in Germany, I sat down and I looked at those small little donations, and something really terrible struck me. Like, school kids donated money for me, the kind of money that they had. So, and you see here what was left over from PayPal. So there was a young boy who donated 50 cents for my work. So the commission took 36 cents out of this 50 cents. So at the end of the day, I got 14 cents out of 50. And I said, that cannot be good, like that cannot be fair. That was certainly not the intention of that boy, right? He wanted to support me, not PayPal. So, and it happened to be a very nice coincidence that I got aware of a startup which was founding in Munich. And we sat down and they introduced me to their technology. And in a way, that started something that I feel very strong about, and I want to introduce it to you since I've been asked to do that. So, Walter Isaacson, I'm sure you read one of his great books, once said, we need a one-click system with a really simple interface that will permit impulse purchases of a newspaper, magazine, article, blog, or video for a penny, nickel, dime, whatever the creator wishes to charge. And guess what? It's there. Last year, it was exactly a year ago, we launched the beta version of this micropayment system, and it's called LaterPay. So LaterPay is basically something that should allow you to pay just as easy as liking on Facebook. No registration, no hassle, no credit cards whatsoever involved. You want to read something, you get it for free in the beginning, you pay later. So let me show you how this works. For me as a content creator, I like to put price tags on things. So what we basically do is, what's this called in French or in Britain? A beer mat, something like that, a cobbler? Yes, like a serviette. What? And you sit down in a restaurant and you have a beer, right? And you have another beer, and another beer, and then another beer. So the waitress is not charging you and coming and want money right away. They come later, right? So this is how we try to make this happening. It's a one-click, no upfront registration, no upfront payment, and micropayments up from 5 cents. So you use, we aggregate, and then at one point you will pay. Now here's my blog. So I put a price tag on it. I said this article costs 19 cents. And I don't want to have this confused being a donation. That is, I'm selling this, right? I want to be sold. I work hard. I want to be like being paid, not being like a charity or something. So I say this costs 19 cents. So we call that pay-per-use. So the person gets like a little teaser, sees what he's going to get, and then I say, please pay 19 cents, and you actually press here or there, and then you've paid. That's what we call pay-per-use. We also have another thing which I'm very proud of, because I said, why can't we have something that is like free to use, but we have some extras. Let's break up the work that we've done so far, like an article, into its like little pieces. So the basic article is free, the entire article is free. But if you want some extras, such as a translation or the interviews as a protocol, then you have to pay for that. This was a story that I did in Utah. I wanted to know where all the data from Google, Facebook, Apple, and our phone calls going to be stored with the NSA. So I went to the NSA storage facility hidden in the mountains of Utah and took some nice pictures of it. And so the people could actually buy beautiful postcards of the NSA. And so the article was for free, but the set of postcards you would charge, right? You would pay for it. So let me show you how this actually works. I run you through the process. So free to read, the article, and the extras cost money. So step one is you say, I want to have the set of pictures, so I press here. Right? Then this little image appears, and you say, yes, I want the exclusive pictures of the Utah data center. Buy now. You click again, and that's it. You've here, and the pictures appear on your screen. That's it. Okay? You've paid me money. Let me take you even further. So I experimented last year with dozens of articles and just wanted to try, like, what would people be willing to actually pay? So I made a live blog from Cupertino. I was in Cupertino when they introduced that Apple Watch. So I made a live blog and I said, you can read my live blog, but it's 99 cents. And guess what? There are a lot of Apple fans out there who want to get like a behind-the-scenes live blog, right? Because they knew I was there. And I actually like took pictures that you wouldn't see on usual coverage, right? So people paid for that. Or I did pictures and sold the license for those pictures because I knew there's a huge demand for like Apple Watch pictures, right? So I said, you can buy either the blogger license, it's a little cheaper, of course, or the professional license so that you can reprint it in magazines or, you know, so. And so I did a lot of experimentation. At the end of the day, I made 1,800 euros just with that one story. You might say, okay, this is not enough. Like, but it's okay, right? It's better than, I used to do that for free. Seriously, I used to do that for free. So I took the money, and I sure will in the future. So what you can actually do with the system is you can sell text, you can sell games or in-app purchases within games, you can sell videos, music, you can sell other services. Anything that's digital you can sell from starting point 5 cents and up. You can even move into some sort of subscription. I recently started to sell my archive, my blog archive. And it works like this. You just pay a time pass. So the system recognizes and remembers when you bought the pass, and it will appear, everything will be opened up to your computer or your mobile device once you've paid that amount of money. Now, how does it actually work? The trick is that we aggregate small and little pieces of money. So we don't charge you for every 5 cents or 10 cents or €1. Once you've reached 5 euros, that would be the moment that we ask you for one time for your credit card, your bank account, for your PayPal, whatsoever. And that's it. We register your device. Either it's a mobile device or your desktop. And then we know that this is your device, and we're going to charge all the stuff that you consumed to that device. And you can always say, you can even return purchases if you didn't like the article. So we have pay-per-use, we have single sale, we have free to read, and time passes. And I'm right now still in the in the testing mode. This is like the back end of my WordPress blog. If you're familiar with WordPress, this is the app that goes with it. So you can have that for your WordPress blog and test it. So I can see how much I did. It's really neat. And again, I'm still experimenting. I have no like real long-term studies yet. But this is the number I'm sure that you wanted to see. This is the revenue per mil, or the conversion rate. And I'm not a business guy, not at all. As a matter of fact, I'm just a stupid, like old school journalist who happened to run a blog. But I was told that this is pretty good. Like whoever deals with numbers. So, and given the fact that my blog posts, that the ones that I sell, make an average of 105 euros, I have a niche blog, a niche. Like I don't go for cat content and stuff like that, or I'm not a fashion blogger. I have maybe 5,000 readers a day. But imagine what this would do to a newspaper that has not 5,000, but let's say 500,000 viewers a day. That's a Süddeutsche Zeitung. Again, with one article. Well, I'm sure you cannot compare the two, and I have more loyal people who are willing to pay me money than the Süddeutsche Zeitung, but still, think about it. Have you ever tried a system like this? I haven't. So, if you're interested in, we've actually started to roll it out. Globally is a little too much, but we started to roll it out last week at the South by Southwest in Austin, Texas. So we're bringing it to the US since last week. And if you're interested, this is the guy you need to contact if you want to have further information about the system. This is my alarm clock, so I'm about to end. You remember this slide from the beginning? This was I 5 years ago, money-wise. Now here's me today. So I'm still working at the television, broadcasting. Actually, I like the guys. I like television. I like the medium. I like the news. I like the beat of a newsroom. But I expanded my salary quite a bit, right? And the blog actually doesn't draw or pay my rent. But me blogging is being out there. Me blogging is having the attention, the distribution channel that I was talking about earlier. And this actually now empowers all of the rest, right? People book me for events, for workshops. They want me to write articles and so on. This wouldn't be if I wouldn't be me out there, online. And the final remark before I'm going to close this talk, this is the Süddeutsche Zeitung that I talked before. Now, it's a very peculiar and very interesting time these days because the Süddeutsche Zeitung, after a long time of waiting, built a paywall starting this week. And all the publishers in Germany are very much interested in how that works. On the personal side, I hate paywalls. I hate paywalls not only like commercially. I'd like to be paid by people, no question about it. But me personally, I have learned a great lesson about paywalls. 5 years ago, when I was shielded, I was protected by a wall myself, being a 100% dependent journalist with public German television. I was protected against recession, people lost their jobs, so I felt safe. But a wall always works in two directions. So while I was protected, I was also shielded from innovation. And although my life now is really, really hard. I work twice as much as I used to do 5 years ago. But it's so much more worth living. It's so much more thrilling. I get to meet like people like you. I wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for my blog. And that in itself, thank you for inviting me, is just the greatest thing that you can achieve, to be like amongst people who are really trying to reinvent themselves. And I did it for myself, and I hope you can all do it with your news entities and newsrooms. If you have some questions, please don't hesitate to grab me, and thank you very much for your attention.
We may have time for a couple of questions if you have them. I had a question, which is how do you fix your prices? Why 19 centimes?
That's trial and error. It's a matter of fact, I'm still learning. I have not the slightest idea what my work actually is worth to the people, because we never asked that question. You have always bundled products, right? You have always, like, you bought, look, I had a newspaper subscription of the Süddeutsche Zeitung. I was never interested in the sports section. I never read the classified, so I just put that out immediately. So what is worth what you're actually reading? I had no idea, and I'm a journalist for nearly 20 years now. I had not the slightest idea. Isn't that embarrassing in a way that you don't know what you're working on and how much the people are actually thinking it's worth? I think it's kind of sad.
And how about advertising? Are you looking at trying to bring some advertising?
Well, I experimented a lot. I had Google Ads, but that revenue or conversion rate was not really anything near what I'm doing now. I had sponsoring on my blog post on my blog site. That was beautiful, because I signed a contract for a year, and somebody put his logo up there and said, "Proudly presented by." And I think it's kind of, it's kind of transparent, because the people know, okay, he gets money for that. And I wrote a blog post on the conditions, so that there's no interference like what I was writing about. So that was nice. They paid nice money. I hope somebody watches and will sponsor my blog in the future. And again, there's not that silver bullet that will replace and refinance everything. I think in a way how I finance myself, you must think of how to refinance journalism. And let's be honest, guys, journalism never, ever in the entire history refinanced itself. It was always subsidized by advertisement, by other events and so on, or by Jeff Bezos.
Great. So we have time for a couple of quick questions. Anybody? Yes. If you want to ask en français, I can traduire.
Okay, I will try in English.
C'est bien.
C'est bien en français?
Ouais.
Super. Est-ce que vous pensez que vous auriez pu faire le même chemin, mais si vous n'aviez pas été à la télévision classique avant? Si vous n'aviez pas été connu finalement?
Even better. Even better. People ask me that question quite a lot. Are you successful because you were on television? Well, guess what? Most of the audience today even doesn't know that I'm on television. They have no idea. Sometimes my Twitter followers are like asking, "What, Richard, you're on television? Why didn't you tell us?" They have no idea. It's a complete separation between two audiences. And again, I think that's sad today, but it will vanish over the years. So, no. On the contrary, sometimes like it's a burden.
Any more questions?
Thank you. Back to your read now, pay later system. We didn't see any registration moments, so how do you recognize the users? And when comes the man with the bill? How does the payment act happen? When does it happen?
A good question. We do a technology that's called fair tracking. So we only get the data of your device that's really needed in order to identify you or your device. So what happens is we register by one time agreeing that we are allowed to track your device. We do track it, and we see what kind of contact you consumed. And once you reached the €5 bar, then we kindly ask you to give us a credit card or something. We won't charge you immediately, like it will pop up more and more so until you finally do it. But we give you the courtesy that once you're on the train station, you really want to read that thing. Like, we just kindly remind you that the next time that you're in the office or at the desktop, please register your thing when it's convenient. So we want to be like fair. We think for the consumer and not for the content provider in the first place, and I think that makes a huge difference. Well, then you've lost €5. But if you don't pay like after 5 or let's say 7, 8, 9 euros, then you cannot use the system anymore.
Okay, two last questions, and then we have to move on.
Final question: why do you think it's working? Why? How come you have been so successful with your blog?
Why? How is this becoming a success? I'm persistent. I'm a pain in the ass. I'm not very talented. I'm not a good writer. I'm not a good photographer. I'm not a good filmmaker. But I'm persistent. If I believe in something, I go the extra mile. And I think not many people do that these days anymore.
Hello, I was a blogger for a long time, and I realized to have some news to update my blog every day. I was a culture blogger, and it was a lot of work. I mean, a bit of work to advertise myself. Not to advertise, but to exist on the different social networks, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Flickr, etc., and etc.
Meerkat.
Yeah, Google Plus.
Are we still running here?
So there were I was using so many social networks just to be there.
Yes.
So everybody can see in my description the address of my blog. But I think it's a work, and each time I go somewhere, each time I was going to see a movie, each time I was going to see a piece in a theater or reading a book, I was always thinking what I'm going to talk about. So my question would be, don't you think it's becoming a little obsessive to think always about the personal branding, and it goes into your life?
That's a very, very good question, and I must be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out. It's a matter of fact. Like last night, I ate a what was it? Tête au veau, like because I was told Jacques Chirac eats that a lot, so I tried that. So I was thinking about, should I put that image of what I was eating on Facebook or not? I decided not to post it. Yes, you're welcome. So. Right, you're right. So what I'm doing is basically trying to figure out like what's good content for Twitter, what's good content for Facebook, for Instagram, for Meerkat, for that matter. So it's a constant, ongoing process. I don't have any answer. I'm not smarter than anyone here in the room. I'm just doing it, and what works I keep, and what doesn't work I just drop it and try the next thing. And we're going to hear of Richard GINGRAS of Google News pretty soon. And he gave me a really, really good advice, if I may. Like he says, you'll keep on doing that until the end of the days. You have to like reinvent yourself over and over and over again. It's not like once you figured something out, then you can have a nice life for the end of the days. That's not how it's gonna work. And since Richard told me that advice, I'm a little desperate, but yet more, I think, realistic about the future. Thank you very much.
I think we have to wrap up now. Thank you very much,
merci,
Richard.
merci.
Okay, we're going to go straight into our next speaker as soon as she has managed to hook up her computer. So James Bond and the Tête de Veau, that's kind of the good sequel, right?
Yeah, right.
So our next speaker, I'm delighted to introduce, is Elnaz ESMAILZADEH, who is the commercial product manager at the Norwegian website VGNO, which is, I think, the biggest Norwegian website. You were originally at Unilever, a brand manager. You moved over into the media at Schibsted, and then you moved to VG. And you're going to talk to us about how you build an ecosystem using different and niche websites. So thank you, Elnaz, for your presentation.
Is it working? Yeah. Hi. Maybe you're wondering what a commercial manager is doing at VG. So basically, I'm working with the developers, the sellers, and having the responsibility for having new increased revenue at VG. So I don't know how many people here does know about VG. Could you raise your hand? Some? Okay. I have a lot of information just in case. We started in 1945. And we're based in Oslo, Norway, and we're 400 people working there. And we have Schibsted Media Group as an owner, and they're actually also owner for Le Bon Coin and 20 Minutes. So we have a very strong player that's getting more and more important for us. This numbers has not yet been official, but last year we had a revenue of 234 million euros and a profit of 38 million. So yeah, we're really excited about that, and we are present at the paper, desktop, mobile, tablet, and we also have web TV, and are trying a little bit now with linear TV, going the opposite way. Yeah, so in Norway we have a very unique position. We actually have a coverage of 54% of the population, which gives us a very good foundation. And only desktop covers 48%. So adding mobile to it, we cover 50% of the population. So we have a very strong digital position. And our digital revenue stands for 73%. So approximately 60 million euros were from our digital ads and 23 million from print. So what's interesting here is that even though mobile has now better reach than print, still print is a better, more revenue than mobile. So that tells us that it's a little bit harder to get the same type of revenue digital as it was getting at print. So basically we're under pressure. The newspaper sales drops. It's not the same thing right at the moment to get the same type of revenue from the paywall. And before, advertisers were buying TV, outdoors, and VG. Now the environment is totally changed. Now the long tail is bigger, and there are a lot of options. So we're trying to figure out how we can get new revenue. We're experimenting a little bit about content marketing, giving the experience to our advertisers to let the readers stream away. For instance, adding this to our newsfeed, but market very clearly that it's an advertiser. But we also started to look at what type of content do we have. On our news page, we have news, sports, entertainment, travel, cars and boats, technology, and weather. And that appeals a lot to men. But what about the women? Those are the ones that we need to target, but also that helps us to get new advertisers. For instance, L'Oreal is a very big player, and they don't want to advertise at VG because we didn't have the women's site. So therefore, we developed 4 different niche sites regarding fashion, food, weight loss, and also a type of BuzzFeed site, TLDR. Do you know what that stands for? You were the target group, but that's correct. Too long didn't read. So we can aim for the younger people. So very short about the Weight Club, it's that you register what you eat, and you get a lot of help from experts and articles, and Too Long Didn't Read, TLDR, it's kind of like BuzzFeed, like I mentioned. So the communication is quite different from VG. You can see that, for instance, from this video. What happened was he's moving away the microphone, and in VG we would never communicate like this. So we have a clear focus on what are our target group and develop the communication towards that. And this was our food site, and be honest, how many here finds it inspirational to cook something? Seeing this? Raise a hand. Luckily nobody, and actually, that was what we saw. From our niche sites, it was only 28,000 per day that went to the site. And it was strange because in our survey, they said that food is actually the most interesting section that they want to know more about. So obviously, we had a problem because our fashion site had more visitors than the food site. So what we did was that we improvised. We changed our mindset and had a more product owner mindset. And we didn't have a clear plan that this is what we are going to do in 1 year and putting it step by step. Instead, we started thinking, okay, now we have a chef, and what should we start doing? Okay, it's Eastern. And wrote about having chef with you in the Norwegian forest. And that was a total fail because nobody goes to the Norwegian woods and grilled cheese. I don't know why we didn't see that coming, but it was a total fail. So we actually implemented the Netflix method, which is give readers exactly what data says they want. And the data was there because we had the food site previously, and looking at 2012, in Google searches that came into our site and our site as well. 17th of May is the National Day in Norway, and everybody was looking for cake. What type of cake should I do? So when we saw that increase of search at our site, that was the perfect opportunity to launch with a concept regarding that. So we had a competition about how to cook the best 17th May cake, and that just hit the spot. People were really interested, and we got a lot of traffic, and that set a baseline for us to continue in that way. Testing, failing, testing and failing. But we also learned that we cannot copy what we have in print digitally, because digitally you need to be more specific, clear, and a little bit shorter than what you have in print. So that actually has worked quite a lot for us. The traffic is steadily increasing. We have recipes. For web TV, for instance, we saw that we need to have 1 minute clip maximum.
Presenteres av Bremykt, steke
and that gave
og
us new sponsors.
Mange lurer på hvordan man får glasur.
We can fast forward. So instead of having 10 minutes of cooking, we saw our user behavior in 1 minute. That works. And this is a popular show at our site.
Løft kaka over på et fat.
So we also want to engage our users. So we have a cookbook where you can save the recipes you like, but also a reason why you should log in, and I will go into that later, why that is important for us. And content. It's very important for us to get as much content as we can. So free content is to take out food bloggers, because that increase engagement, because food bloggers get interested. Oh, they put all my stuff there and I get traffic. But at the same time, we get free content because we haven't produced it. We just republished it. The same thing with social media. Everybody here knows that it's very important. So we have a hashtag where people that love food, they can take a picture and hashtag it. And when we see something interesting, we ask them to do a recipe for us so we can publish it, and that's free as well. At the same time as we get a high amount of engagement. And now, every now and then we have celebrity chefs that we publish stuff from. So basically, the site is all about engaging people and making them want to cook. But at the same time, if you want to go to a restaurant, what should you do and where should you go? So today we have Norway's biggest food site, approximately 500,000 unique visitors per week, and 1.3 million page views per week. And that's only 1 year. So that's really exciting. So the main thing here is actually that, like I mentioned before, okay, we got the women, but at the same time we wanted to reach to new advertisers. So we went early on to Meny, that is a grocery store, and they barely advertised at VG. And we teamed up with them and came up with a concept that will not destroy our integrity. And since this is a favor for our users and not a article, we thought that it's okay if they give us information so we also can get content. So every week or every day we have recipes that's on oral channels, and between Thursday and Sunday Meny can deliver their recipes, and in that way they give us content, but at the same time our readers can get good content and Meny can show their brand and get associated with a reliable newspaper. So here is just to show that where it's placed, and below you can have an offer, for instance. And then it says clearly that this is delivered by Meny, because we want to be very transparent and say that we haven't done this and this is a type of commercial cooperation. So basically, it's the same functions. You can save it and such. And what's really strange is that their recipes are more popular than ours. So they know their stuff. And that's the point, because advertisers have a lot of knowledge, but they don't know where to spread it. So we are a type of distributor. And for mobile, because we have to think different devices, they have an app. So what we do here is that you can save the ingredient list in their app. So when you go to the store, you can see, okay, for this recipe, how much did I need and what type of ingredients. So it's all about finding what will work for them and at the same time be good for our users. And when we've done that, we don't do anything. We only have a conversation with Meny and talking about what type of foods should we maybe focus on this week. So that's one reason why we chose to cooperate with Meny, because they're a distributor. You can go to another grocery store, so you're not locked with one type of brand. And that was very important for us, because we want to have the freedom to say that, okay, we maybe should focus on another type of food, and yeah. I can skip here. So with another advertiser, we've tried to increase engagement, that you could win a kitchen device. And their struggle was that yogurt is very boring. So they want to inspire people. And the competition was that for Easter, make your Eastern yogurt. Or for the 17th of May, the National Day, do that. So in that way, they could show that yogurt is more than just taking yogurt and maybe Cocoa Pops or Kellogg's. When it comes to the fashion site, we're working on branded content there as well, but what we have launched recently is e-commerce, because our journalist, she tends to recommend products, and that's not bought. I get all the time mail, how can I get recommended? And I said, no, our journalists do it by herself. But what we added is that readers, they want to buy what's recommended. And we've just made it one stop. So when you click, you can buy it. But this third-party company, they have a lot of companies in their site. So you can buy this product and we get a percentage out of it. So it's not Sarah or H&M, so we're forced to write about those type of clothes. She writes whatever she wants, and if that's in the store, then we will promote it. So it's actually a really tiny department. It's one journalist at the food site that published 2 things per day. And the revenue last year was 1 million euros. And primarily, the income was from menu, half of it. For the fashion sites, there are 2, and the revenue was 613,000, and there's still a lot of things to touch up on, so that will also increase to 1 million this year. The Weight Club, that's actually a paid membership, and they have 27,000 members, and the revenue is more than 2 million. And then the TV spots that you saw, she works primarily with 2 shows for the food side and 2 shows for the fashion side, and that generates 155,000 euros. So it's actually a tiny department, but still it gives us big results. 3.6 million to be exact. So we covered that area when it comes to our users, to cover the women. So we're having that and the younger public. But what's also important is in the big aspect, because now we have more inventory. And what VG really is focusing about is data products. So you can buy segmented through the sites. But for instance, if you want to buy reach, you want to buy 25% reach a day or 70% reach per week. When we attract women and younger people and get a more spread audience, then we can have those type of numbers and go to the audience and say, well, just leave this banner and we will place it everywhere in our site. And then we also have the fashion site, for instance, and then you will reach more people. Or another opening is that on the food site, we're starting again with the data, searching through articles, and if it's a match with a word or a theme, then your ad can come. Because nowadays customers don't really thinking about that, okay, you have your campaign period in 2 weeks. I want to see the ad when I'm looking for it. So when you're looking for a recipe and it says, for instance, crème fraîche, then your ad will show up. So it's an always-on strategy, and then you will guarantee yourself to having more money from the advertisers because you will have a solution that fits them. And lastly, we'll get target groups that are getting more and more important, and that's why people are moving to Facebook, because they have predefined target groups. And that's something that Schibsted is working on, so we can have a cross data. This is just a quick picture, because then you can, this is now I'm getting in the big picture here, but just to show why they're important, because then you can see what are their transactions in Le Bon Coin, or what are they searching for prices and personal finance, what are they reading, and then you have more defined target groups and can start having your competition with, for instance, Facebook. But how do we work with the niches if you want to start working with that? Well, we define a product owner that will have the overall picture for the product and seeing it as a product. Thinking about the content with the TV, what should we produce, with the development and for the house, promoting it and getting everybody on board. And analyzing data, as I said, was very important, but also working with the commercial, having a commercial dedication and want to see the product be beneficial. So I'm going to quickly go through 7 steps, what we have done. So you have to define what's your section, what should it be, and why is it not. You have to have a clear vision, and what you deliver on every day, what your readers expect that you should deliver every single day, and what values should you have, and what position. For instance, this one, of course, gave a lot of clicks. But is that what we want to be in our fashion site? We didn't have any clear picture of what we wanted to be, and we just saw we got a lot of clicks, but that wasn't important. So we predefined ourselves and said we're going to be helpful and make the readers look good. And that basically worked better because it was clear what we are doing. And you should set clear goals, make pursuing goals fun. We set an internal goal that we are going to beat our magazine in followers on Instagram. That was a small goal, but still making it fun. Okay, now we're close, and now we're 11,000, and they're 10,000. This was actually really important for the food site because she's the writer for the food site, but at the same time, she has opened up analytical programs because then she can live see, okay, this article did not engage so much. Maybe I should twist it or write about something else. So she knows a lot about what's happening and having a dashboard in front of her. For instance, this is everything that she looks through in one single day. Getting reports, how was the data before, how is it now with the traffic, how is it in social media. So she gets a better understanding of what the users are doing and what's working and what's not working, and therefore can tweak it. And do not overcomplicate digital content. For instance, where is the asparagus here? It's like, so you have it there, and it's very simple. And when you're going to, for instance, recommend clothes, don't think quantity. Quality is better. Choose what you want to front. So just think simple, again, and not like print. And internally, maybe you feel like you don't get the same type of cheeringness as your group, and you have to try and make everybody involved. For instance, asking about advice, so they feel the product, what is it, and getting motivated and cheer for you. And internal lobbying was very important, especially for the food side, to make everybody engaged. And do not fear the commercial. This is a picture of the product owner. And I work in the commercial, and our seller and our business developer. The reason why the food site got so successful was because she took contact with me in early stage and wanted to see what works, what doesn't work. This is, for instance, the fashion site, and that didn't work as good because I got involved later on. And that's very important because one thing is that you attract new readers, but what's also important is that you have to capitalize on it. So involving the commercial department really early and not be afraid of it, because you're two different departments and shouldn't really discuss stuff. That's also an older way of thinking about things, because commercial departments doesn't want to risk the integrity of the newspaper. So it's more about, okay, maybe you should design this page differently so we can have a standard banner, or maybe you should think about this advertiser because that one is an opportunity for us. So we have good experience, like I said, with the food site. And lastly, work lean, because that's a crucial, I would say all these 7 points, this is the most important one, because we are not creating a whole new niche and putting it out there. We're creating small elements, testing it, measuring it, did it work, and learn from it and tweak it. For instance, if you're considering doing a fashion or traveling section, you could just add a button to it, and it shouldn't be anything behind it, and just say that if somebody clicks on it, thank you, we're just seeing if people are interested. And then by that, you will see how many did actually click, because in surveys, people say stuff, but they don't actually do it. But here you will measure what do they actually do. So you can start by that, and when you see people are clicking on it, then you can add stuff on the way and measuring that instead of launching it, hiring the journalist and everything. So that's really important. So just to summarize, focus on innovation. I think everybody's agreeing on that because that's been a very good investment for us. And when you're working as a product owner in the newsroom, that's a mindset that we have actually starting to adapt in our regular newspaper, VG, and closely with commercial department. And like I said, it's not to mix it up, but just to put in all the commercial opportunities that are out there. And dare to fail. And the reason why I'm saying that's more cheap, because people might say that, oh, I don't afford to try stuff because it costs. No, it don't. Because when you add this button, like I said, you haven't invested in a new niche site, because you only develop that button and then you will continue and test and fail, because it's more expensive to do a completely new site and then fail on that. And there is a lot of data there, and start to have a plan what you should do about it. I mean, we're having a plan what we should do with the data in the newsroom, but also data for the commercial, because it's always been talk about big data, but now it's talk about what you should do with the data. So, merci beaucoup.
So thank you very much. So what do you do when you're your one journalist goes on holiday?
We have interns, or those type of, I don't know what it's called, practicants? Yeah. So pay them by the hour or per the day.
And what about the bloggers? Are they starting to put pressure on you to be paid?
No, they're just excited to be on Norway's biggest newspaper. That's more exciting for them because then they get traffic. So it's a win-win situation because they promote their blogs.
Okay. Any questions? No reaction. Is this a model that could work in France, do you think? You have a tête de veau site? No? No. Okay, well, listen, thank you very much indeed for that presentation. We're going to have a break now, but for 20 minutes at 4:30 precise, we restart with Jim Roberts. So we'll see you in 20 minutes. Okay, so our program is going to start up again now. If you'd like to come and take a seat. All right, so we are going to now listen to Jim Roberts, who we had on our panel a little earlier on. He's talking about the future of digital storytelling, and just to remind you that he is the Chief Content Officer and the Executive Editor of Mashable, and had a long career at the New York Times, and also was the digital editor at Reuters. So Jim, thank you very much.
I'm not sure we're on. Yes, we are. Yeah, we are. Okay. Let me make sure I've got this thing working. So thanks, everybody. So, le futur du digital storytelling. That's what they asked me to talk about. But I have to tell you, I don't know what that future is. And if anyone tells you that they know what that future is, you shouldn't believe them. Because we know from experience that it is impossible to predict the future. In general, it's even less possible, I think, to predict the future in terms of digital innovation. But what I will try to do in the course of this conversation is to talk about some of the things that I think about when I'm preparing content for my own site, when I'm working with my colleagues, when I'm thinking about the state of the news business as a whole. And hopefully, through the course of it, you can find some things that are useful. As I alluded to earlier, I've been in the news business now for 40 years. I spent a quarter of a century working with some of the finest journalists in the world at the New York Times. Many of them, as I think I alluded to earlier, were somewhat reluctant to embrace the potential of digital storytelling. I felt that there was an underlying fear about how fast the industry was changing and how some of those changes were threatening traditional practices and conventional business models. But thankfully, I think a lot of that resistance is beginning to wear away. That more journalists are realizing, as I've said many, many times, that we are in a golden age of storytelling. We are at a time when the tools of expression, the tools of interaction with an audience are more sophisticated by the day, that allow us the means of reaching people in ways that were unimaginable 5 years ago. The world, though, as all of you know, this world is filled with challenges, not just business models, not just competition, but understanding how this array of tools, apps, software can affect how you go about presenting information and how you go about reaching an audience. And among those challenges, I think, are posed by two devices that we are going to, hear a lot about in the next, months and years. Obviously, the watch is getting a great deal of attention. What are we going to do with it? I don't have any better idea than I have about the future of digital storytelling. Or devices such as this, where the potential of immersive devices like VR devices, how that could change storytelling. Maybe 2 or 3 years we come back and see where those two devices have really taken our business. But I think that they are definitely the things that I want to be watching, and I know that my colleagues will be. Anyway, let me walk you through some of the principles that I spent a lot of time thinking about, and I would encourage everyone to, as they approach the challenge of digital storytelling. Okay, first one. You don't own the platform. You may own a platform, but you don't own all of them. and the array of digital platforms that we are publishing on now and will continue to be publishing on will grow again by the day. Some of these platforms, blessedly, will send traffic back to your sites. Facebook mostly does. We'll see about tomorrow. Certainly Twitter does. Instagram doesn't. Snapchat doesn't. It's worth talking a minute about Facebook because they are in the process of rolling out a new system wherein publishers will be hosting content directly on the site. I think we'll know a lot more about that tomorrow or the next day than I do right now, but I do know that both the New York Times, BuzzFeed, and a handful of other publications have been working with Facebook on this pilot project, but I emphasize pilot because I would be very certain that this will grow further. Already Facebook is hosting videos that many of us are creating. They're being played within the news stream. They are being played independent of our websites or our apps, and this sort of thing will definitely continue. So the future, to me, of digital storytelling does not exist on a single platform, and we need to learn to adapt our content in ways that perform on multiple platforms. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, it means creating videos that play within the Facebook newsfeed, that are optimized for that platform, and that may be very, very different from the way similar videos would be playing on your own news sites or on YouTube. It also means adapting our content to work on Instagram or adapting it to work on Vine. It means creating unique photography that works on various platforms. I think it's worth thinking about embracing new channels as platforms for experimentation. I assume some people have seen. Excuse me. Let me get to the next slide. Here we go. Meerkat. This is an app that did not exist a month ago. No one had ever heard of it 3 weeks ago, but it has now exploded onto the scene with great ferocity, and many publishers are beginning to experiment with this app. The second image is my boss, our CEO, Pete Cashmore, who is actually in a car. I'm not sure what he's doing or what he's actually talking about. But for those of you who haven't tried this, it's a very interesting live streaming app. It sits on top of Twitter. It has great Twitter integration. It allows an audience to talk to you as you're broadcasting. You can then, in your voice, address the people whose comments are sort of scrolling in under, at the bottom of that window. We also did it yesterday. That's Prince Andrew at the Pitch at the Palace event. I think that we had to tell him what Meerkat was before we could actually get him to agree to appear. I'm not sure he understood it even after we talked to him about it. But this is the kind of thing where a new app or a new device is available to us. Let's try to figure out how we can use the tool. Let's figure out where it fits, how we can experiment, how we can reach a bigger audience. The tweet that I put at the bottom of that slide was something that one of my colleagues had posted yesterday while the Prince Andrew thing was going on, and the journalist who was doing the who was doing the broadcasting had used those phrases, "You are currently live on Meerkat," which again is something that we would not have heard about a month ago. So what do we do with all of this? I just think this is a question all of us ought to be asking ourselves. A new platform comes around, Meerkat, Vine, Instagram. What do we do? How do we take advantage of it? and where do the opportunities lie? Understand mobile. You know, this, I'm sure to many people this goes without saying, but there's something very specific that I want to talk about here. This isn't just a matter of creating content that works uniquely or ideally on mobile. I hope that everybody by now has understood how important it is to think of mobile first, or at least give priority to how your development is carried out with mobile technology in mind. What I think is very critical right now to publishers is to think about what mobile consumption is like. What are the patterns of consumption? Our editors in your newsrooms, for instance, they working on these giant Macs, 27-inch monitors. Does your CMS include mobile preview as your editors are working on your site? Do you as editors look at videos, at the finished videos in a mobile framework before they are published? I know I don't do that enough, and I know that my newsroom probably needs to do it even more, and we have to. Most news sites a year ago, if not 2 years ago, crossed the 50% threshold, wherein now for us it's like 56, and I saw, I think, was it maybe BBC.com, 65% of its usage is now on mobile platforms. So if you're not thinking about how your editors and how your newsrooms interact with mobile in the process of creating content, you need to. I also want to talk about the patterns of mobile consumption too. These are two slides that I noticed, I think earlier in this month. They were it was representative of a single day, and obviously you can't read too much into a single day's traffic, but this was Mashable traffic. The top chart is Mashable traffic on the desktop, peaking in the middle of the afternoon, as it virtually always does. That's, I think, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. And the mobile, the graph below that shows the mobile traffic, or at least traffic to our mobile app. And what it does, it shows this little spike at 11 p.m., which I've seen on other days. That's not completely unique. But that makes you scratch your head a little bit and say, you know, what's happening at 11 p.m.? And I'm just guessing, and I'm sure analytics could tell us more, but I'm just guessing that a person coming to a news site at 2 or 3 in the afternoon is different in their desires than somebody who's coming at 11 at night. My guess is the person coming at 11 at night wants a little more entertainment, wants something to have fun with. So maybe we should be thinking about producing a different type of content at 11 p.m. than we might be producing at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Okay, rethink the story. And I think this comes a little bit more toward the future of digital storytelling. I'm not the first person to say this. Attention spans are shorter. We're filled with a world of distraction, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, Snapchat, random YouTube videos. It's imperative that people like us adapt to this environment, understand how content is being consumed and being shared, and adapt your content creation to take account of that. I'm going to give you a little bit of history of our own site. This will take maybe 2 minutes. We started in 2005 as a blog that was devoted to the new and evolving world of social media. This, I think, was one of the very first posts that was published in July 2005. Most of the coverage was on the emerging world of social media. MySpace was a thing. We covered that. The emergence of Facebook, Twitter a couple of years later. By 2008, it had become known as the Social Media Guide. and in large part because of the way it had covered those emerging industries in ways that other publications had not been. But as time went on, we took on more sort of broader-based tech coverage, which was certainly good for the business. It also expanded the audience to the point where, here we are in our existing iteration. We have a fully responsive site, which works very well for our business model. Our ads are responsive. We sell a single package to advertisers. We also have mobile apps, but much of our traffic is coming to the web view. Our audience is 50% male, female. We consider our audience to be millennials and those who think like them. The largest age group is between 18 and 44. And I think if you drill down, the big bubble is between 25 and 35. Pretty much a global audience, mostly clustered in English-speaking areas of the world. I think we're almost at 2% in France, and hopefully we'll grow more. But most of our audience is obviously in the United States, but it's almost 50-50 U.S. versus the rest of the world. We have done a lot of real-time news coverage. This is one thing where I feel like, even with a relatively small staff, we've been able to use social tools as a way to connect us to world events. We've also invested quite heavily in entertainment, climate, gender equality, and travel. Those are all subjects that work very well for our audience. And we continue to focus on some of the core aspects of the coverage that we've been doing for almost 10 years. Technology, social media, business, and digital culture. We take great pride in this set of statistics because so much of what we do, so much of our business model is built on the notion of social sharing. We do a lot to engineer our site to make it easily shared, and we do a lot to make our content shareable, the kind of stuff that readers want to show their friends, their relatives. So this set of statistics comes from February. These are tweeted links to individual publications, and why I'm very happy with this, why being in third place for us is incredibly good, is that we produce only a mere fraction of the content that the BBC and the New York Times does, yet so much of our content has done well spreading through social channels. So I want to go back to the idea of redefining the story. These are some of the principles that really do animate the type of coverage that we like to give our audience, the type of coverage that we feel we can give our audience, despite the fact that we don't have a huge staff. We have, as I said earlier, about 55 journalists. They are mostly in New York, but we have offices on the West Coast in San Francisco and Los Angeles, as well as in London and Australia. We'll soon be opening an office in Singapore. But even with a relatively small staff, we try to cover a full range of breaking news topics. We want to be in the conversation when big events happen around the world. We know we can't cover everything, but we feel that our audience is very attuned to a lot of the big topics that are in the news media, and we want to be part of that conversation. We want to be a trusted source for them. But we also know our limitations there. We know what works well for our audience. So so on the one hand, we are trying to cover a full range or a broad range of global news events, but at the same time deliver content that is very specifically tailored to our audience. So here are some of the things that I think really do work for us when we are thinking of digital storytelling. So again, if I'm asked to talk about the future of digital storytelling, I might dodge that question, but I will say these are the ways we look at it now. These are the ways that I think work very well for our site, and I think can work well for others. Our storytelling is very visual. People love photographs. Photos are incredibly powerful. The best of them carry a wealth of information. They incite people's curiosity. They really appeal to people's imagination. We've done a lot of work with this column called the Retronaut, which we acquired less than a year ago, and it's proven to be extremely popular with our audience. Works very well in a mobile view, and this kind of thing has produced not only great traffic but incredible time spent on the site. That's one of the nice bits of metric news when we think about the future is, what can you do to keep an audience engaged? And strong photography delivered in a compelling and rewarding format really does work. This is another example of something that did incredibly well on our site. The visual beauty of nature photography is a resource that we've invested some in and will continue to do. We do a lot of storytelling that is based on social information, information that we get from, in this case, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. This is how we covered, or at least one day, this is how we covered some of the news from Gaza last summer. We teamed up with a company called Storyful to help verify a fair amount of user-generated content, mostly photos, but in some cases YouTube videos that were coming both from Gaza as well as Israel during the conflict. And so we don't have correspondents, obviously, covering an event like this. We will occasionally engage freelancers, but what we were able to do with this project is give a view of what was going on from the people on the ground through the lenses of their cameras. And those are just some of the tweets that we were able to find and verify, at least to the best of our ability, to publish on our site. We did a similar execution with a hurricane that came across the East Coast late last year. This was a project that we used a tool produced by a company called Geophedia, which finds Instagram images, uses geotagging to find Instagram images. They also have a tool that allows you to plot out on a map where the photos were taken and then to browse through them within the window of that tool. Storytelling really is immersive. We've worked with our developers to create very visual pieces of content, very visual executions like this. Sometimes they are simply built around photos, as the Ebola piece was. Sometimes they're built around specific news events, as the Comet was. Explanatory reporting does incredibly well for us. Again, it's something that we can do without having a team of foreign correspondents. Our content, we try to make our content very helpful, and doing charts like this. I mean, 661,000 shares. Whenever I pulled that screenshot, which was months ago, that is probably one of the highest sharing pieces of content that we've ever done. We like to have fun. Our audience likes to play around with memes. So do we. And when we see a good one, we like to republish them. And our audience rewards us with a lot of time spent on posts like this. I think the storytelling we do is very simple. After Apple announced the iPhone 6, all we had were dimensions, but no phone, at least for 2 weeks before it was actually on sale. So we 3D printed a fake phone and asked our staff to try to put it in their pockets, just to get a sense of what the size of the iPhone 6 Plus was going to be like. Very simple. Took a few hours to create, and it was a fun piece of a minute-and-a-half video. And there's probably nothing more simple than working with Legos. And so when it was time to cover the midterm elections last November, instead of using a team of graphic artists like CNN had the access to, we plotted out what the U.S. Senate was going to look like with Legos, and that's how we covered politics. So there's a lot you can do. My final word is the future of digital storytelling very well might be Legos. So that's it.
Thanks, Jim. So what would be the longest piece in terms of word length that you would ever run?
Believe it or not, the longest piece that we've run on Mashable is longer than almost anything I ran at the New York Times. We did a piece about the history of Reddit that was somewhere in the vicinity of 9,000 words. Now, Reddit is a subject that doesn't appeal to everyone, but the people it appeals to, they really like to read about Reddit. And so we thought we thought the audience was there for a story of that length and depth. So,
but do you have some sort of metrics on the optimal length? Where do people stop reading?
It's a great question, and I'm sure we could look into it. But when we do a post or a story, we're not so much thinking about a word count, but we are thinking about what are the components to it. And as long as we feel like there are strong sort of visual elements to keep your attention, whether it's an image or a piece of video, Instagram, anything that sort of keeps your mind ticking, we sort of feel that'll help propel interest in the story. So we do. I would guess that most of our posts are in the realm of, say, 600 to 800 words, something like that. But we don't have a limit, and we don't really think about any cutoffs or anything like that.
Okay. Just open it up to any questions on the floor. Everyone's sinking into exhaustion, I think. So.
I know. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Well done. Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So we're going to close the day, which has been, I think, very interesting. Anyway, certainly I found it very interesting with Richard GINGRAS, who is the Senior Director of News at Google.
Hello. Is this, yes. Hi. I was in Berlin yesterday. I also gave a talk at 5 o'clock. So this is 2 days in a row where I have to give a talk where I'm standing between a crowd and their cocktails. Not a good idea. Today I'm also just going to use my words, not a slide presentation or anything. So you're probably wondering, why do I have both my MacBook Air and my tablet? Well, the truth is I need a stand for my tablet. So we're going to take and use a $2,000 Mac Air and use it as a tablet stand for a $150 tablet. The technology innovation just doesn't stop, does it? Anyways, I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. My very first efforts, by the way, in digital media began in 1979 here in Paris. I was building my first digital news product at that time, and it was using technology called broadcast teletext. And that technology that we were using came from French companies. You might recall the word Antiope or the French Videotex system, Minitel system. Those were the technologies that we worked with. It brings to mind, by the way, one of my favorite stories of technology innovation. As part of that effort, as part of that collaboration, we had engineers from France working with us at our television studios in Los Angeles. And we'd regularly get shipments of experimental televisions from Thomson CSF. One Saturday, I was in my office. There was no one there. It was just me, and was surprised to see a few minutes later one of the French engineers, an endearing fellow by the name of René Desassis, whose wife, by the way, was an extraordinary cook. he said, and so I asked him, I said, like, why are you here? And he said, well, I'm here because I wanted to get a head start on unpacking this new gear that we just got from Thomson. Upon which he opened the back of one of these sets and tumbled out several kilos of French cheese and butter. Which his wife had insisted that he find some way of getting into the States, because you couldn't get it through customs. So yes, that marked the first ever digital transmission of fresh dairy products. I don't believe it's been done since. Anyways, getting a bit more serious. When I'm in Europe these days, I'm typically trying to provide, one, clarity about Google's role in the ecosystem, engaging in discussions about how we can strengthen our mutually beneficial relationships with publishers, and along the way, frankly, building long-term friendships, which is great. I often explain that while the objective of a publisher is to build great go-to sites, sites that people want to come to, it is our job at Google, for the most part with Google News and Google Search, to build great go-away sites. The only metric, for instance, my team at Google News cares about is how many publisher articles get clicked on. That's how we measure our effectiveness. If the user isn't clicking on articles, then we're not surfacing the right ones. We're very proud of the fact that Google overall sends some 10 billion visits to news sites each month, and while Google News itself makes no money, those 10 billion visits from Google represent real revenue to the publishers who create those articles, and that's a very good thing. We know at Google that the value of our services, specifically search, is directly related to having a rich and sustainable knowledge ecosystem. We also know that we can all better attain that objective through close collaboration, which is why we're here today, in sharing of ideas, in providing enabling platforms, in helping improve information architectures. And there's a lot more that we can and will do going forward. Let's talk about the new media ecosystem, because that media ecosystem born of the internet is by far the most open communications environment in the history of civilization. No comparison. Our cultures now have the potential, in a sense, to support freedom of the press as never before. As an American, the open internet is, in a sense, our First Amendment brought to life. It's the democratic ideal. Anyone and everyone can publicly express themselves to the entire world, or the world that matters to them. Such open public expression can happen because there are no gatekeepers, except where governments take restrictive action. Unfortunately, such restrictions happen far more often than any of us would like, whether that's blocking YouTube in Turkey or arresting bloggers in Egypt. Sadly, but assuredly, politicians around the world will continue to suffer threats to the open internet. And governments will often use fear as a motivating force to convince their populations that such restrictions are both necessary and proper. I learned that lesson of the fragility of free expression from my father-in-law's experience fighting the politics of fear during the Red Scare period of the 1950s. He was a Hollywood screenwriter. His name was Dalton Trumbo. He wrote many great films, Roman Holiday, Exodus, Spartacus, many others. In the 1940s, he was the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood. But in October of 1947, he was called before a committee of the United States Congress and asked a single question: are you now, or have you ever been, a member of the Communist Party? He refused to answer that question on First Amendment principles. The government had no right to ask him his beliefs. He was cited for contempt of Congress, found guilty, spent a year in prison, and blacklisted. For the next dozen years, he was relegated to writing scripts under assumed names for very small amounts of money. 2 of those films, by the way, won Academy Awards under assumed names. For me, it's a lifelong reminder of how a government's constitutional principles regarding free and open expression can crumble, even in an apparently advanced democracy. By the way, it was Dalton Trumbo who penned the phrase, "I am Spartacus," that has evolved into a template for memes. Je suis Charlie. Restrictions on expression and innovation can also come through the efforts of corporate interests to control their historical markets. The history of modern communications is littered with such efforts. In the United States, for an example, the introduction of FM radio was 20 years behind the rest of the world. Not for lack of technology, not for lack of capital, But due to the determined efforts of David Sarnoff and RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, to hold back FM in an effort to protect their vast interests in AM radio. The open internet will challenge us. It will generate a cacophony of voices and a fragmentation of audiences. It will challenge our understanding of the economics of information. It will challenge our incumbent institutions who will want to go back in time to a golden age they remember, which may or may not have been so golden. It will challenge our politics. It will likely challenge our understanding of who we are. Will we be able to resist the urge to control it, to lash back, to make it no longer open? That's the story that will play out over the coming years and decades. Why are we here? At the highest level, I assume we're here because we care deeply about the evolution of media, care deeply about the evolution of journalism. I also believe we're here because despite the challenges of such dramatic change presents, we're excited by the opportunities for innovation because we realize we are experiencing a renaissance in media creativity and are energized by the kind of creative breakthroughs we're seeing, and in fact, see here today. Allow me to share a few observations about the ecosystem and how one might approach it. When it comes to the new digital era, I believe it's easy to miss just how dramatically the internet media ecosystem is compared to the old. The internet is most typically seen as a shift in how media products are delivered. What we used to deliver via ink on paper is now delivered via pixels on screens. In fact, I think as many of us now know, the internet changes every dimension of the media model. First, more news and information is being consumed by more people than ever before. There are now nearly 1.75 billion smartphone users, and that number is expected to exceed 2 billion by 2016. Fun fact number one, more cell phones were sold in the world last year than toothbrushes. Maybe not a fun fact after all. Today, media dominates our daily lives. We twitch with stolen glances at the screens in our palms, as I see in the room, or as wearable devices evolve attached to our faces, our wrists, or clothes. Fun fact number two, according to Motorola, the typical smartphone user checks their device 150 times a day. Some of us, many, many times more. We learn via studies from Pew and other research efforts that more news is being consumed than ever before. It is consumed throughout the day and from a far broader array of sources. And of crucial importance, it is consumed through various modes of discovery. Social networks and search engines have effectively taken the place of newsstands, news boxes, and the promotional circulations that we put on airline seats. These are the low-cost marketing funnels, as it were, that have allowed new digital brands to go quickly to tens of millions, and in some cases, hundreds of millions of users in a very short period of time. Media, in fact, is no longer just a part of our lives. It has become the very fabric of our lives. We now maintain many of our relationships entirely in the virtual world. I, for instance, have more relationships in the virtual world than in the analog world, and I'm sure I'm not unique. We don't just consume media, we in effect live within the media. The internet changed our basic relationship with media. We're not just consumers, we're producers. Indeed, we all have the ability to be journalists and publishers, and millions have seized that opportunity whether they or we think of them as journalists or not. And today's news consumers are no longer the passive audience respectfully absorbing what the high priests of mainstream media want to tell them. They direct their own media experiences. They pick the voices they want to listen to, some mainstream, some not. They contribute, they share, they comment, they push back. Given these dramatic changes, the very definition of a media product and its attendant business model require fresh thinking as well. Too often, I sense the internet is seen as an extension of past markets rather than a new market in and unto itself, a new marketplace that requires a rethinking of any existing product. One can find lessons in other media environments as they evolved. Each environment, whether it was a new media form like radio or television, or new ecosystems like cable or satellite delivery, spawned unique product configurations and unique brands. Let's look, for instance, at further historical context regarding newspapers in the United States, where in fact the modern American newspaper was the direct result of earlier technological disruption. In the United States, newspapers historically were not particularly profitable. Most large cities had 4, 5, 6 or more from varying viewpoints, areas of focus, and quality. New York had dozens. It was a tough business. In each market, the largest circulation paper did well, a few others did okay, the remainder struggled. But something significant happened in the late 1940s. Television was introduced. Television ad revenues grew very rapidly. Within 3 years, they took 15 to 20% of the total ad spend in the United States. Indeed, within 3 years of television's introduction, newspapers went from owning 37% of the advertising market to 25% and further downward from there. As a result, not surprisingly, we saw a steady decline in the number of newspapers from 5 down to 1, in some cases 2, with combined sales operations that the Justice Department said was okay to happen. We went from having a rich set of voices to having only a few. However, for the newspapers left standing, it marked the introduction of a 40-year period of extraordinary profitability. The survivors went from fighting for every ad dollar to having near monopolistic control over local ad pricing. They had tremendous distribution leverage and appropriately used it to fullest advantage. Now the story gets to the true lesson of this bit of media history. And the lesson is this, that the design of a media product and its attendant business model is as tightly tied to the structure of the underlying marketplace it's in as a specific flower or plant is rooted to a specific climate or habitat. You can't take a redwood tree and put it in marshy wetlands and expect it to survive. Ironically, the disruption of television triggered the golden era of near-monopoly newspapers in the United States. It resulted in a dramatic expansion of the newspaper product from a thin one to a thick one. Opportunities to sell advertising stimulated many new editorial approaches in many new editorial sections. We had lifestyle sections and gardening sections and automotive sections and food sections, fashion sections. All of these soft news sections were created because the ad sales department basically said, we can sell a whole lot of advertising to home improvement centers if you'll give us a home section that can build an audience for us. But alas, that unique position could not last forever. The onset of cable television in the United States with its vast array of targeted channels was the first to chip away at this highly profitable product. Then in the 1990s, of course, the internet happened, and the landscape began its inexorable change. With that open distribution came many new voices, from Craigslist to Monster.com, from Salon.com to HuffPo, from 1 million blogs to 1 billion social posts. From a standpoint of democratic free principles, would anyone really want to turn back the clock on that one? I don't think so. The openness of the internet and the attendant shifts in the information and advertising economies changed the definition of a successful media product. While newspaper and magazine product models are highly effective in a print media ecosystem, those product models do not directly translate to an open digital media ecosystem. All things to all people newspaper portals of 4 decades ago have become far less relevant as the web has matured and spawned thousands of media products focused on nearly as many niche audiences. To me, this suggests the following. Does one transform an existing brand into this new ecosystem? Or does one analyze the new information marketplace, find new opportunities, and create or acquire the appropriate product and brand for that opportunity? Whether it be large opportunities in, say, sports coverage, targeted offerings in areas ranging from politics to public policy to parenting, or highly commercial opportunities in employment listings. Might it be wiser, in a sense, to consider breaking the umbrella brand conceptually into its component parts, each with its own carefully tuned approach to the product experience and the business model? The question has no single right answer, but it's a question that deserves to be asked. Many traditional media companies, including the New York Times, are now beginning to recognize this by launching sites and apps that are focused on target markets. Last year, for instance, the New York Times took the rich evergreen assets they had in food preparation, some 17,000 recipes that had been buried under the New York Times brand, and launched it as a standalone site. And I was absolutely fascinated with the Schibsted presentation because that's clearly the approach that's going on there. Where can we find niche opportunities with targeted solutions? I would also suggest that another large opportunity for new products will come from the potential of data journalism. Most of you have already incorporated data journalism into your reporting efforts, analyzing massive data sets, exploring public sources of data, and so on. Such efforts will have, and indeed must have, a major role in the future of journalism. Even more so if we embrace a shift in thinking about journalistic form and function. Can media organizations leverage data journalism to not only help with stories, with crafting that 3,000-word story, but to build persistent, in a sense, automated information services that live on, to build what I think of as knowledge utilities. The potential is huge. Here's one example, and an intentionally esoteric one. 3 years ago, ProPublica in the United States launched a deep investigation of the practices and performance of dialysis treatment centers. There are several thousand in the United States. As part of that investigation, they, of course, did the three-part, 3,000-word article. But they also launched and continue to maintain the dialysis tracker, a potential life-saving tool that allows patients to locate dialysis treatment centers near where they live and assess their medical performance, their morbidity rates, their costs. Such approaches to creating knowledge utilities can provide immense value to audiences and often for comparatively modest ongoing cost. In many cases, knowledge utilities can have their own successful business models. And in fact, ProPublica has developed a very significant line of revenue off of their data journalism efforts. In a sense, it was that kind of thinking that caused the New York Times to see the opportunity in cooking. It represented a product shift from here today, gone tomorrow editorial approach to the knowledge utility approach, providing ongoing value from expensively produced content that otherwise would have been dropped into the archive or what newsrooms, at least in the United States, refer to as the morgue, which is where content goes to die. Yes, today's digital media ecosystem is massive and varied and chaotic. Whether we like it or not, fact-based journalism competes with everything from raucous opinion to corporate advocacy on a near equal footing. That very fact suggests both the opportunity and the responsibility to rethink the very architecture of the news article such that excellent fact-based reporting can rise above that maelstrom of public expression. The media ecosystem of 1975 was comparatively meager and easily understood. There were clean buckets of brands, newspapers and magazines that were introduced to us by our families, our classmates, our friends, our colleagues. In the United States in 1975, the total number of newspaper, magazine, TV, and radio brands was numbered in the low tens of thousands. Obviously, we have an ecosystem now where it's in the tens of millions. As rich as it might have felt back then, it obviously pales in comparison to today's vast media ecosystem. An ecosystem where there are far fewer cues to help us form a sense of the credibility of a given source, of a given voice. Motivations vary. Conflicts of interest are often unclear. It's an ecosystem that challenges the underpinnings of the old trust model of trust us because we're us, trust us because we're the New York Times, trust us because we're FAZ, trust us because we're Le Monde. Over the last few months, a collective industry effort has begun to form called the Trust Project, an effort led by Sally Lehrman of the Markkula Center for Ethics, and one which I helped get started as well. It includes news organizations from across Europe, the United States, and beyond, from Al Jazeera to Zeit. The effort pursues the following questions, both big and small, and I would ask us to consider them as well. How might we help our readers divine fact from fiction, distinguish between wisdom from spin? Or are we simply giving into the chaos and hoping that somehow our voice, our brand, will magically rise above it? Can we provide better signals, more points of information to help a reader make more informed decisions, to help search engines, for that matter, better understand and rank results, to help the myriad algorithmic systems and recommendation systems that are increasingly molding our media lives? Signals which often, I find, are sitting in a publisher's internal workflow systems today, not harvesting their true value within the ecosystem that they're in. Might we divulge, for example, within a consistent framework, the impressive expertise that resides in quality news organizations, that helps the reader decide why this person might know what he or she knows, that allows the reader to understand the full body of the reporter's work, their sense of expertise over the subjects they cover. Last fall, I sat down with a talented young reporter by the name of Adam Ellick, an extraordinary multimedia journalist at the New York Times. He did the original documentary on the 12-year-old Pakistani girl Malala Yousafzai. And her getting shot in the face 7 months later is something that still burdens him with a sense of guilt. He told me he had recently finished a 3-month reporting effort about ISIS. And his piece had just completed several weeks of extensive internal vetting with editors and lawyers. He was pleased that it would finally be published the next day, but he also noted with no small amount of melancholy that his work would likely be rewritten and republished by many others. When a reporter like Adam talks to me about the deep vetting that his or her piece went through before the publish button was pushed, I ask, why doesn't the reader know that? In an ecosystem where we consume content based on the social recommendations of our friends, why don't we know of the professional peer endorsements that back that reporter's work? In a news ecosystem where any enterprising story is followed by an explosive cloud of derivative work, might we learn the backstory that this reporter, Adam Ellick, was on the ground in Pakistan, not desk-bound and constrained to the range of the mousepad? Might we embrace the practices of academia and even Wikipedia and make better use of structured citations to show the underpinnings of a reporter's fact-based efforts? We don't suggest such architectural rethinking is a panacea. There's no demand that such approaches be applied to every or any piece of expression. But we do believe that news organizations can and should be loud and proud about why they, the New York Times or La Stampa or ProPublica or Le Figaro, deserve to rise above the maelstrom and get the attention and respect they deserve. Can trust drive revenue? Can programmatic ad systems benefit from having a deeper sense of the regard in which a particular brand is held? If you talk to Dave Gehring at The Guardian, he'll point to comforting evidence that premium advertisers share the same quest, finding signals in the ad exchanges to align their efforts with premium media brands. But most importantly, I believe it's crucial that journalists and publishers proactively consider how content architectures might be tuned to the needs of the new ecosystem in this ever-expanding maelstrom of free expression. I've been working in the digital trenches for 35 years. That being said, I often note that the biggest difference between me and anyone else in the room is that I've made more mistakes than you have, and that is absolutely the case. What I've learned is the importance of stepping back and questioning all assumptions to reassess what one currently thinks of as ground truth. I've learned that innovation in new markets requires experimentation that will often generate failure. And I've learned through direct experience that the primary challenge, and often the most difficult challenge, as we discussed today, is changing the culture of an organization to both encourage reassessment and creative risk-taking and to accept the inevitable failures that happen along the way. It's important to note that the world has never experienced such dramatic and pervasive change, so it shouldn't be surprising to us that corporate cultures may not be optimized to address such rapid change. In fact, corporate cultures have been designed for the opposite. They've been designed to optimize for consistency and efficiency and risk aversion, not for rapid, often massive cycles of change, right? Innovation is hard. I don't mean to suggest it's easy. But innovation is not just about a sexy new user interface. It's about what products are crafted for which markets. It's about rethinking not just what is produced, but how it's produced. It's about considering how one builds an organization with the appropriate resources and the appropriate mindsets such that constant innovation is imbued into the organization's DNA and into the role of each and every participant. And it means, again, establishing that sense that mistakes will be made. That's a good thing. That's where true learning happens. And in fact, I think it requires that we think differently about it in our organizations. What I was going to note earlier is one thing that's unique about digital is, yes, the cost of innovation is less, but also we have much greater capabilities to experiment. If you're going to create a new feature, you don't need to roll it out to all 100 million of the users of The Guardian, for instance. It's important to create experimental frameworks that allow one to create new features and test them with small percentage of the audiences. It lowers the risks and also changes the psychological dynamic from my saying, I've got a great idea and I better not be wrong because I'm putting it in front of 100 million users, versus my saying, I think I've got a good idea. Let's try it out and let's learn from it. Very different approach, subtly different. We know at Google that past success does not guarantee future success. We've learned as well that shifts in the underlying landscape, for example, the rapid shift to mobile or the rapid growth of social, can happen way faster than we expect. We increasingly realize at Google that the culture itself must continue to evolve, that the only perfect culture is one that can recognize its inevitable imperfections and seek to address them. Yes, we live in challenging times. But there's never been so much experimentation and innovation in journalism. We see that here today. We see that in the success of Edwy Plenel and Mediapart. We see it in the Pulitzer Prize-winning efforts of ProPublica, the Center for Public Integrity. And I'm very proud to say my former Salon colleague, Glenn Greenwald, for his work on the Snowden story at The Guardian, which he now continues at The Intercept. I also have no doubt that long-standing media companies will continue to find great opportunity and success in the digital realm. They've got great core assets to work with, and we're already seeing great progress. But again, innovation is key. Experimentation is key. I do see this era as an absolute renaissance of creativity in media and journalism. All the experience of the last 20 years points in that direction. It will not come without challenges. It will not evolve without ongoing innovation, but it is happening. Yes, we live in interesting times, likely far more interesting than any of us had ever expected. I'm certain that the future of journalism will indeed be richer than its past. In fact, I believe it already is. But it will also be quite different than its past. Many of us, may all of us for that matter, find the excitement and the passion and the creativity to address these challenges and harvest these opportunities and share that excitement with others. I thank you very much for your time.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap up pretty much, unless anybody has any questions or thoughts on that. A great uplifting ending. I mean, I think in 1845 it was a pretty lousy time for carrier pigeon owners when the telegraph came in, but you know, people got over it, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you very much indeed for a great day, and à bientôt.